If Robert had stopped bothering the witnesses, we'd be able to get started. Okay, pursuant to the order of reference for Bill C-15, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22nd, 16 and other measures, we're here to hear from a number of witnesses in two sessions today, and then we'll go to committee business. So to the witnesses, welcome. We have with the Canadian Convenience Stores Association, Alex Shelton. Canadian Federation of Independent Business, Daniel Kelly. Canadian Wheat Board Alliance, Andrews Brunn. And the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Hedrick Brackel. So I guess we'll start with you, Mr. Shelton. Welcome.
Thank you.
About, I think we gave witnesses 5 minutes roughly.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you, committee members, for giving me the opportunity to present on behalf of the Canadian Convenience Store Association. My name is Alex Shelton, and I'm president of the association. The Canadian Convenience Store Association is a trade organization that represents over 26,000 convenience stores operating in Canada that employ over 230,000 Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Many of these stores may be small businesses, but together we contribute significantly to Canada's economy and serve at the centre of many communities. To give you an idea of our economic footprint, Canadians purchased over $51 billion in goods and services from members of our industry last year alone. These sales resulted in over $18 billion in taxes collected for both federal and provincial governments. We're also significant employers to new Canadians, providing newcomer entrepreneurs an opportunity to own and operate their own small business. When I presented to this committee during the pre-budget period, I highlighted two priority areas for our association, which fall under the purview of the Minister of Finance. The first was the impact of excessive merchant credit card fees, and the second was the persistence of illegal, untaxed tobacco that is sold throughout Canada. These are two very important issues for our retail members. Lower credit card merchant fees will have a positive impact on small businesses, allowing them to employ more people and make capital improvements in their businesses. It also offers potential benefit for consumers as it will allow these businesses to offer more competitive pricing. Conversely, the persistence of illegal tobacco in Canada undermines the work of our law-abiding retailers who sell legal tobacco in a controlled, regulated manner to consumers who are of age, where governments partner in the controlled and regulated sale of these products. We're very pleased to see mention of both of these issues in the report tabled by this committee ahead of the budget, and we'd like to thank committee members for their attention to our issues during these consultations. Admittedly, we were disappointed that there was no mention of these measures to fight illegal tobacco or cap merchant credit card fees included in the 2016 budget. As Canada's tobacco landscape continues to change, addressing contraband and counterfeit tobacco products is critically important for our law-abiding retailers, for governments who benefit from the taxes on these products, and for Canadians in general, as the contraband and counterfeit markets support organized crime and undermine Canada's tobacco control strategies. In the face of additional proposed changes to tobacco regulation, including flavour restrictions as well as plain packaging, more must be done to address the already robust illegal tobacco industry operating in Canada. It's very important that members of this committee understand the impact that changes to these regulations will have for our retailers, for government tax revenue, and for the safety and security of Canadians in general. For example, our association is aware of several illegal tobacco outlets operating in Canada who are retailing at least 30 different types of menthol tobacco products that are now restricted in many provinces. These products are sold without required taxes, are non-compliant with Health Canada regulations. The variety available is actually far greater than the amount of legal taxed menthol tobacco products available for customers in our stores across the country. As the government considers banning menthol tobacco products in Canada, it's important to draw attention to the lack of resources present to fight Canada's robust illegal tobacco trade. Banning these products from our retailers will not remove them from the store shelves of illegal retailers. This ultimately undermines the intention of the ban to begin with. We are hopeful that situations like this will be taken into account in future budgets. Since the tabling of the budget, there's been productive movement on the issue of credit card merchant fees. It is no secret that merchant credit card fees in Canada are amongst the highest in the world and have risen sharply over the past number of years. As committee members may be aware, there is presently a private member's bill before the House of Commons which proposes to lower or cap merchant credit card fees. The Small Business Matters Coalition, which is a group of 24 business trade associations, including the Canadian Convenience Store Association, that represents in excess of 98,000 small businesses operating in Canada, is supportive of this bill. We're hopeful that members of this committee will consider lending their support to this bill once it comes up for vote in the House. As a final note, I'd like to draw attention to the commitment made to lower the small business tax rate to 9%, which is slated for Budget 2017. This is a measure which Canada's convenience stores would greatly benefit from. Lower business taxes free up revenue for our stores to invest on improving their business, training employees, and offering the best possible service to customers. We look forward to seeing that change made as part of the next federal budget. We appreciate the opportunity to present to this committee and look forward to continuing to work with you on behalf of small businesses in Canada. I'll gladly take any questions from the committee members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shelton. Turning to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. We are thrilled to be in front of Finance Committee to share with you a few views from small and medium-sized firms about the budget and the budget implementation. Just as a reminder, CFIB has 109,000 members across Canada. All of them are small and medium-sized, independently owned and operated business, none of them publicly traded corporations. And, of course, we represent our members on a variety of public policy issues, finance obviously quite high on that list. The total tax burden is right at the top of our members' priority, followed by government debt and deficit, and third being government red tape regulation. Progress has been made on some of these issues, but more progress needed definitely on others. I did want to start with the small business corporate tax rate because I represent a lot of very puzzled small business owners right now. We were thrilled in the election campaign when all four national political parties, starting with the NDP, committed to reducing the small business corporate tax rate from 11 to 9%. The Tories, after the NDP first made the promise, the Tories then put it in the budget and legislated the commitment to the 9% rate. We were thrilled when now Prime Minister Trudeau endorsed that policy, committed to that policy dozens and dozens of times on the campaign trail. Elizabeth May, the leader of the Green Party, also committed to do the same. So you can imagine our surprise on Budget Day when the budget says that Budget 2016 proposes that the small business tax rate remain at 10.5% after 2016. We're very pleased that the new government did move forward on the first quarter, I suppose, of that commitment to reduce it to 10.5%. But many small business owners are deeply upset that the government has now chosen to abandon that promise with no prospect for reinstituting it whatsoever. In fact, if you see on slide 5, the very best advice that small business owners give the government in terms of what would help them strengthen their own business performance at this rocky point in our economy is reducing the current federal small business corporate income tax rate. So that was the #1 suggestion from small business owners in advance of the budget. We've been trying to figure out a reason why the government did this, and some have been floated out there. I have to say, after meeting with several cabinet ministers, many MPs of all parties, there has been no suggestion as to why the government chose to take this action. Some have suggested that small businesses are now categorized in the mind of the government in the category of the rich. And I just wanted to draw your attention to slide 6 that shows that the average income of small business owners resembles very much that of the general public. There are 4 times more small business owners earning less than the low-income cutoff than there are those that are earning $250,000 or more, a definition of the rich. Another theory that we explore on slide 7 is that the small business deduction sometimes traps small businesses and they don't want to grow beyond that $500,000. And when you look at the number of medium-sized firms in Canada, that might stand as a theory. But what slide 7 shows is while there is a little bit of crystallization, a small bump of businesses around the $500,000 threshold, the vast majority of businesses are way under that threshold, many of them earning under $50,000 a year in their business. A second issue we still remain puzzled on this, and we would love if through the committee presentation we could explore why the government chose this action. I will say a second issue that we're very serious about right now is the passive income rule. Right now we have members that are campgrounds in your ridings across Canada, self-storage facilities that are losing access to the small business corporate tax rate because they have fewer than 5 employees. Through a weird interpretation, government is now considering small firms with fewer than 5 employees in these sectors as being too small to access the small business corporate tax rate. We did get the previous government to commit to reviewing this policy in the 2015 budget. The 2016 budget says that the review is over and the current rules stand. And now we have campground after self-storage facility that are being audited, many of them suggesting they will go out of business because they are being reassessed by the CRA. We need some help in terms of clarification on those issues. Third issue I wanted to raise is the cancellation of the youth hiring credit. One of the things that we loved about the government's platform was the idea that small businesses would have employer premiums on EI waived for 2016, 17, and 18, and that would help them hire youth between ages 18 and 24. That was the promise. That too appears to be scrapped and replaced with a committee to study youth employment. I'm not sure that we're going to get any new youth hired in Canada by creating yet another committee to do it. I do want to remind the committee that small businesses will, in fact, see their employment insurance rates go up slightly in 2017 at about the worst possible time that one could imagine. Finally, we are very worried that the Finance Minister has made a personal commitment to increase the Canada Pension Plan in the year ahead and said that 2016 will be the year that a deal is delivered. I did want to say, though, that we really do encourage you to resurrect Emmanuel Dubourg's private member's bill on business succession. That was a bill that he introduced in the last Parliament as a PMB. We loved that idea, Bill C-691. That would allow small business owners to transfer their businesses to their children without incurring huge capital gains. In fact, many businesses say that it is more cost-effective for them to sell their business to a stranger than it is for them to pass it on to their kids. And we provided some background in our document to explain why that's so powerful. So I do urge you to reintroduce Emmanuel Dubourg's bill at the earliest possibility. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. Turning to the Canadian Wheat Board Alliance, Mr. Brunn. Welcome.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I thank you on behalf of the Canadian Wheat Board Alliance for the opportunity to be here this morning And I can say that it's a special honour for me to appear before a committee that my own Member of Parliament, Mr. Ouellette, is on. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I make this presentation on behalf of the Canadian Wheat Board Alliance, a voluntary prairie-wide group of farmers, in place of Mr. Ken Sigurdsson, who had been invited but is unable to attend. Farmers continue to deal with the fallout from the dismantling of the Wheat Board. Section 38 of Bill C-15, Budget Implementation Act 2016, gives us a window into that process. Now, if you have had a look at that Section 38 and the provisions relating to the tax treatment to be accorded to certain instruments that are being issued in relation to the Wheat Board, you'll understand my next comment. Section 38 is a tangled mess of verbiage, maybe the most tangled I've seen in the 40-plus years since I started law school. And I say that with the greatest of respect to the drafters in Justice and in the Canada Revenue Agency and so forth who crafted this. I'm sure the provision does what it's intended to do in a competent and efficient way. But I want to get on to talking about the underlying units that that whole section deals with. On November 2, 2011, then Minister of Agriculture Jerry Ritz appeared before the Legislative Committee on Bill C-18, which had just been introduced in October, and proposed to dismantle the Wheat Board effective the following August 1st. At that time, he stated in answer to a question from Mr. Valeriot, now this is Jerry Ritt's answer, Mr. Valeriot, they will elect their own board should they decide to do that. I have a copy of the transcript from that portion of that hearing if anyone wants a copy of that. Much has transpired since that date. The government removed the farmer-elected directors a few weeks after Mr. Ritz had made this statement in mid-December 2011, and the former government operated the Wheat Board behind that veil since. No financial information relating to the operations of the Wheat Board after July 31, 2012 have ever been released. Nothing has ever been released. The government-controlled board even had a hand in finalizing the Wheat Board's annual report for the 2010-2011 crop year. Then on April 15 of 2015, Minister Ritz announced that the Wheat Board was to be transferred to a joint venture of Bunge Canada and Saudi Agricultural and Livestock Investment Company, SALIC, called G3. You can see their website, it's g3.ca. So this brings us back to Section 38 of Bill C-15. G3 has promised to issue to farmers delivering to it wheat, in addition to the purchase price that's negotiated, $5 in trust units for each ton of grain delivered to it. G3 will pay nothing for the Wheat Board and its many assets to government or to farmers except for these trust units. That's it. That's all. There's a lot of value there. That's all anyone in Canada is receiving. Section 38 deals with applicable tax laws governing these trust units. Now, what are these trust units? A portion of Order Number 7163, issued by the Manitoba Securities Commission on July 24, 2015, is attached to this submission. I've just taken pages 20 to 23 and attached them to the submission that I've made to members. I have a copy of the entire order here, if anyone wants that. This is all that farmers are getting. Not only are these trust units exempt from security laws, farmers receiving the units must agree that they will not have any statutory rights of action in the event of misrepresentation. Okay? The only thing we're getting are these pieces of paper, and if there's a misrepresentation somewhere made along the line that induces someone to do business, and they get this piece of paper and it doesn't pan out well, they have no statutory rights. No securities law protection, no statutory rights in respect to these pieces of paper. The whole thing with these trust units is that they're exempt from registration. See Section J, which is on the second page of that attachment. It is because of this total veil of secrecy relating to the operations of the Wheat Board, not a single number since August 1, 2012, and the uncertain value of the trust units. Remember, you have no right to sue even if you're fooled into a transaction which gives you one of these things. We recommend and urge in the strongest possible terms that recommendation 48 of the final report of the House of Commons Standing Committee of Finance in regarding its consultations in advance of the 2016 budget. And that recommendation reads, the federal government provide Western Canadian grain and oilseeds farmers with a full and transparent accounting of the disposition of the Canadian Wheat Board's assets since the Marketing Freedom for Grain Farmers Act received royal assent, and the effects on the grain handling and market system since that time. And I submit to you that this review needs to be done externally, and it needs to be done by people who know what they're looking at. It almost needs to be in a forensic sort of review. It cannot be the typical whitewash review.
I'll have to cut you there, Mr. Brunn. We're over your time.
I thank you, and that was the last thing I was going to say. Of course, we offer any assistance the committee may want going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brunn. Turning then to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Brackle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and committee members. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, a network of 200,000 businesses across the country, and a lot of interest in the budget, a lot of questions about it. I think business is really excited about the budget, and it's because a lot of the things that they're most interested in are soon to come. The infrastructure phase 2, the export corridors, those are absolutely critical to getting our products to market. We've seen a big surge in exports last year and manufactured in a lot of Canada's roads, ports, airports, infrastructure is under pressure. We really appreciate that. The innovation agenda that's coming is soon to come. That's an amazing opportunity that we're excited about. Canada already has high public expenditure on R&D. We're among the highest in the OECD. But where we lag is in commercialization, and that's why a private sector role in innovation through better venture capital incentives and maybe through a patent box, where if you develop a patent here in Canada, you'd be taxed at a much lower rate. Other things that were soon to come in the budget that we talked about was the review and reform, the re-examination of tax credits. That line in the budget caught our attention. We think it's a great idea. We've been talking about tax simplification for years. Our members who are tax accountants tell us that the tax code is very complicated, and if tax accountants are telling you that things are complicated, then probably it's a challenge. I want to definitely emphasize Mr. Kelly's comments on the tax rate for small business, the deferral of that. I mean, that's a great way to stimulate the economy, is putting more money into the pockets of Canadian businesses. When they have extra cash left over at the end of the year, that's when they invest. And so it's absolutely critical to a strong economy is having more money in the pockets of Canadian business. So that's something we've heard about from members across the country, how important that is. The other one that's really of interest to members is Canada pension plan reforms. And the challenge is that whether Canadians don't save enough, it's not a universal problem that requires a universal solution. There certainly are Canadians, perhaps, that probably various studies point to about 15 to 20% of Canadians that will see a sharp drop-off in income on retirement. And so what we would say is that really what we need to do is target those particular Canadians rather than having across-the-board increases, because that will absolutely be a deadweight on the economy to have taxes across the board, because effectively CPP contributions, they act like a payroll tax. And so that's why pulling more money out of employers' resources or out of employees' checks will be detrimental to the economy. So we think there's some really interesting targeted measures that would work. And finally, on EI reform, that's another, certainly we would like that to go down to the break-even rate. Lowered EI premiums are critical for our members. So anyways, those are some of the key issues that came to us from our members, and so happy to answer any questions. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Breckel, and thank all for your testimony this morning. Turning to questions, Mr. McKinnon, 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank all the witnesses for being here with us today for our study of this very important first budget of the new Liberal government. Obviously, even if we are studying this first budget, we are still very mindful of the preparation of the second budget and the subsequent budgets that will define this Parliament and this government. And I certainly hope that some of the issues that you have all raised will be addressed positively in the upcoming budgets of this government. My questions come back to what Mr. Brackle said from the Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Kelly as well, talking about tax simplification, either income tax or taxes, period, in Canada. And that is something that we have often heard in this committee while we were preparing the budget and subsequent to the budget as well. And I would like you to set out for us what type of reform or simplifications you would like to see. Where would you begin? Mr. Scholten, perhaps you could start with your comments. So perhaps each one of you, in turn, if you could talk about tax simplification and what we would like to see in that regard. What would the benefits be? Thank you. I could begin. We think that the entire tax system in Canada should undergo reform because there are a number of tax credits, and perhaps there should be a royal commission struck or a panel of experts to look at tax credits and decide which ones are useful and which ones are not, because we believe that by eliminating perhaps the majority of those tax credits, this would allow the tax rate overall to be reduced, and that is what we would like to target. It would allow tax rates to be reduced across the board if we eliminate certain tax credits.
This is a tricky one for us. We certainly are supportive of the idea of tax simplification, and there's no question that there has been a plethora of new credits that have been created, some of which do need to be analyzed as to whether or not they're accomplishing the public policy goals that they were set out with. So no opposition from us whatsoever with respect to tax simplification. However, in our experience over 45 years at CFIB, most governments that embark upon large tax simplification studies and measures end up using that to delay any tax reductions. So we spend lots of time studying the tax code and what can be simplified, very little time studying what can be done to actually inject more of businesses or consumers' own dollars back into their own pockets. So tax simplification is the way that we would prefer that be focused is in working with the Canada Revenue Agency, and some good momentum in previous budgets. And I will say one of the elements of the 2016 budget that we did like is that there were some measures taken with the CRA to simplify and help better interpret tax policy for small business owners. Those are good measures, very practical measures to help small businesses, to help really any Canadian in dealing with the very complicated tax code. I have to say that would be probably our first choice, is focusing on CRA as opposed to a global review of every credit that exists.
And I would echo Mr. Kelly's comments as well. Our members are finding the tax codes to be very complicated. As our friend from the Chamber noted as well, when tax accountants have difficulty interpreting it, small business members are going to find it extremely difficult, which means they're going to end up paying a lot more money to get their tax returns done on a yearly basis, so that costs them even more. Simplification, clarification for small business would be absolutely something that we would support in the future.
Thank you, all three of you, for that. I am going to leave a little bit of time for the Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Champagne, but I do have a quick question for you, Mr. Brunn, and thank you for coming here. The process, I think we all watched the process of the dismantling of the wheat board with some consternation, and specifically around the ability of farmers to be heard in that process. And I'd just like you to tell us, you know, what, as we consider the measures in this budget, and knowing that a lot of the damage is done, and probably indelibly so, but can you tell us a little bit about the process or consultation or lack thereof that characterized the dismantling of the wheat board, and how you've been frustrated in your attempts to get the kind of information you talked to us about today?
Yes, the former Canadian Wheat Board Act, under clause section 47.1, provided that farmers were to have a vote on whether any grain was to be added to or removed from the marketing mandate of the Canadian Wheat Board. And I had another client who challenged the government on this, and we were unsuccessful for technical legal reasons, but we pushed that process up to the Supreme Court of Canada, and farmers were indeed denied any vote, as had previously been promised under the legislation. Further, there were no meetings on the legislation that my client groups were ever invited to. I think the government of the day did listen very selectively to certain small farm groups that were strongly linked with big ag and big chem and big fertilizer and so forth, and took their advice from that faction rather than listening to our group. I think the wheat board at that time ran its own parallel vote to the sort of vote that would have been held under the Canadian Wheat Board Act, and about 62% of farmers said that they would prefer to retain a wheat board, a single desk marketing power, over dealing with, over having to sell to many buyers, all of whom compete against each other to offer the lowest price to the Japanese or the English or the Chinese or whoever. One of my clients reports that he lost
We're over time.
Okay.
Mr. Champagne will have to wait till the next round. Go ahead. Ms. Ray.
I'm allowed to let you finish, but were you finished?
No.
That's not even me. Okay,
We are well over McKinnon's
Apologies, Mr.
allotted
Chair.
time, so we'll turn to Ms. Raitt, and we'll hopefully get you a chance later.
Thanks. I'm just going to do a quick clarification. Mr. Scholten, you said in your presentation that you're understanding that the deferral on the corporate tax freeze is going to be lifted in 2017. Is that your information? Is that your testimony today?
It's our understanding that the full reduction that was in the Liberal Party platform, going to 9%, wasn't done in this budget, but that it would be done in future years.
Can you show me in the budget where it says that? Because you're giving the committee some information that we don't have, Mr. Chair.
It's not stated in the budget.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Maybe you can let us know later who told you government plans for the future instead of the parliamentarians sitting around the table. Mr. Kelly, if I could ask you a few questions on the deck that you provided, I'd be grateful. First of all, on out of curiosity, on page 3, have you seen a change in these priorities from your members over the past number of years? Is this something that is fluid, or is it the same old from what you hear from your folks?
So two of the issues that remain, two of the top three issues are almost always in the top three of our members. This, by way, I should clarify, this is concerns about federal and provincial governments. It isn't just the federal government. But the total tax burden and the cost of government regulation and red tape, those are always near the top of the list. They were for your government and they are for the current government. I will say, though, the concern over government debt and deficit has skyrocketed in recent months among our members. Okay. So that is fairly new, given the fact that the government has not only committed to a lot. I didn't get a lot of consternation during the election campaign about the Liberal commitment to run a deficit of around $10 billion, but we certainly got a lot when that budget target was that was missed, and now the target is a much higher number. Yeah.
On page 6, I'm just trying to get some information data from you, by the way. Page 6, interesting chart. Don't know if I quite understand it as well as I should. Should I be reading it with page 7 as well? So to this point, if I take a look at under $20,000, as seen on the chart on page 6, can I assume if I look at the bar chart next to it that's about 170,000 companies that would be under 20 employees? Is that a fair way of reading the charts together? Yeah,
well, to be fair, they are different bases. The chart on page 6, to be fair, is the actual income of the individual that owns the business.
Got it.
And the chart on page 7 is, in fact, the business income. So that's how much the business itself earns. Okay. Both of them show, though, that the vast majority of individuals that own businesses are at the low end of the income spectrum. Right. From a personal perspective, with all forms of income combined, including dividends. I've been asked that before. The chart on page 7 confirms that the vast majority of business income is well at the bottom end of the spectrum, with very few near the top.
Okay, thanks. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair? Oh, do I really? Okay. I did want to ask a question as well with respect to, if I could, back to the convenience stores. Again, what's the makeup of employees? I know that you've got the big major C stores, you call them, and then you have the smaller independents. Yes. But what's it look like in terms of employment? Because you mentioned new Canadians coming in. Yep. And I'm just trying to get a sense of what the average salary is for those who work in those stores. The average number of employees per store is about 8. Okay. Okay. Average salary, we don't conduct that type of research. It's probably minimum wage, to be fair. I mean, no, I wouldn't say that. Really? Yeah, our industry has to pay above minimum wage to be able to attract and retain employees. Okay, very good. And you said that you're attracting a lot of new Canadians. We are. And why is that? The industry seems to be viewed as something simple to get into. Yeah. And I think many of the newcomers to the country go into this because it's easy to understand, they believe. Okay. We think many of them struggle when they get into the industry as well, though, because it is far more complex. Mm-hmm. A lot of rules, a lot of regulations, a lot of red tape, which makes it a challenge for them. Right. And I guess my final question, Mr. Chair, going back to Mr. Kelly, and anybody else can really chime in on this one. A couple of weeks ago, I understand that the Minister of Finance made a speech and answered some questions at an event here in Ottawa. And in one of his comments, he indicated to the crowd that, in his view, Canada Pension Plan would not be available for Canadians because it was going to be bankrupt in a number of years. Can I get your opinion on what the minister saying something like that means to your organizations?
So the CPP is quite the hot button issue with our members right now. We're very worried about the potential increase in premiums. I will say that, and this often surprises parliamentarians, often it's the view of a group like CFIB that we have never in our entire history ever supported any form of tax increase. And I have to say that that's wrong. When Paul Martin worked to fix the Canada Pension Plan years ago after terrible decisions in the past, our members supported an increase in Canada Pension Plan premiums in order to save the CPP. My understanding is the CPP is safe for 75 years and has enough money for 75 years and is in decent shape, better than a lot of the state pension plans that exist in the rest of the world. But this plan that's being proposed is not about saving the CPP, it's about expanding the CPP, and that's what worries our members. And I just in the spirit of information being provided to stakeholders prior to MPs, I'm wondering if anybody else has heard the same comments from the minister on CPP being bankrupt, because I think we'd like to hear about it as well. Anyone else have that experience? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Wright, turning to Mr. Jones, and welcome to the Finance Committee, sir. Floor is yours,
Thank you,
7
Mr.
minutes.
Chair. Okay, thank you. Just following on the member from member Lisa Rayett, I just want to ask maybe if anyone else has heard about a promise down the road to reduce the small business tax cut, something that maybe parliamentarians haven't been told.
Yeah, we've met with, I'd say, 5 cabinet ministers, 5 Liberal cabinet ministers, and probably 10 Liberal MPs. No one has suggested that the small business rate is coming back. One Liberal cabinet minister did tell us that small businesses should assume that the rate will remain 10.5%, as is stated in the budget.
Mr. Scholten, do you maybe want to just elaborate a little bit more about your comment earlier?
Certainly.
It certainly alarmed me.
It wasn't by any stretch of imagination a promise. It was something that they recognized was in the platform, that they will endeavor to achieve that 9% rate in the future.
Okay. Mr. Breckle, have you heard anything about anything
No,
outside of the broken promise?
We said but there's what we'd heard is it in the budget it says it's a deferral, so it's not cancellation of these tax credits, but it's a deferral. But there was no, we never got any indication of what was when or if when those tax rates would happen.
Okay, I have a question for, maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Kelly. Do you think the numbers from the PBO's office are accurate, or have you done any research around that?
Yeah, so the report just came out yesterday from the yesterday or the day before from the PBO, Tuesday from the PBO. We have had a chance to look at it. Our chief economist has had a review of it, Ted Mallett. I will say the study does, I think, do a pretty good job of looking at the GDP impact of the cancellation of the small business corporate income tax rate. It's estimated at $300 million per year when fully implemented. The job numbers, though, do puzzle us. I respect the work of the PBO greatly, but I will say it looked quite light, given that we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars being taken, in fact, $2.2 billion coming out of small business pockets over the next 5 years. The estimate was around 1,500 jobs, if I recall correctly. When we did delve into the report, it does say that it analyzes corporate income tax cuts in the same way that it would a tax cut for large companies. And as I think we all know, small firms tend to be far more labor intensive than large firms. Large firms tend to be more capital intensive, small firms tend to be more labor intensive. So the job numbers do seem to be light, much lighter than we expected them to be. But the PBO, I think, does a great job of some of the analysis. The jobs number was the part that puzzled us a little bit.
Can you cite any examples of any members of yours that had maybe made plans around the promise cut, around the broken promise that we're going to maybe grow or do changes to their business or capitalize?
Well, thank you for that question. We actually have had I was thinking of, if time hadn't been so tight, I was going to read this anyway. This is an email from a member. This is to his Liberal MP in Northern Ontario. He's a hotel owner in Northern Ontario, and he says, "I voted for you to see how you would do. Do not increase the tax rates of small business. We need investments in jobs in the North. We work extremely hard in small business, employ 22 people, and are thinking about starting a new business as well. Because of the tax rate, we reinvest nearly all of our profits in the business, which means more jobs, more capital expenditures for the region, and an overall bigger tax piece for the government. Do not kill the goose." I know the PM talked about small business being a tax loophole. Well, for tens of thousands of us, it is not. We are a powerful voice in our community. And so this is a Liberal voter that felt quite burned by the fact that the small business corporate tax rate was cancelled in the last budget.
Right, thank you. We know that Liberals ran out a promise to run deficits of $10 billion, and it's at $30 billion. Can you maybe elaborate, Mr. Breckle, about your feeling from your members about the fact that the Liberals have run such a large deficit and they've decided not to follow through with their promise to reduce taxes from 11 to 9%?
Yeah, no, there was a lot of debate and discussion at our last annual general meeting about how important deficits versus balanced budgets are. I think business buys the argument that, okay, fine, we have to borrow in order to stimulate the economy, in order to create growth. So now with the deficits, they're really hoping that we actually see this growth, that this will actually materialize, and that will see that stimulus will help the Canadian economy. I think the business is always, and certainly the Chamber's always been committed to balanced budgets over the medium term, and we sort of recognize that that can deviate from them in the short term to help with deficits. But I think the business really wants to see, is this going to materialize and create the growth to return to balanced budgets?
Right. I think we all know that we all recognize we need healthy business to have a healthy economy, and to do that, exactly, we need to inject money into the economy. And the best way, I think, we're hearing from people is small business. Maybe, Mr. Kelly, can you talk a little bit about the multiplier effect, the impact on small business when we have tax cuts to small business?
Yeah, we do find that the tax reductions for small business are incredibly effective. When you think about it, when you think about the small businesses in your own ridings, these are businesses that are there in good times and in bad. Some of them, unfortunately, do have to close their doors. But I will say that the income that they earn is far more likely to stay in that local community, supporting the local groups and organizations that I think make Canada such a terrific country, local employees. And I will say, small firms do tend to be a little bit slower to hire. They don't create a job unless they know that it's going to be there for the longer term. But the flip side of that is that small firms are slower to fire. And in bad times, they tend to hang on to their employees because they've developed those personal relationships. And I've talked to thousands of business owners over my 22-year career that have said that in bad years, they are taking home less themselves than they are paying their employees in order to hang on to those employees. And that's the kind of thing that I worry is not going to be happening as often, given the snatching away of the reductions that had been promised by all four major political parties.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones,
okay,
Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for coming. I'll start with Mr. Kelly. You talked about the hiring of students and young people, but you didn't actually talk about the fact that with Canada Summer Jobs, we more than doubled that investment. And I know in my riding, for example, that was over 230 positions of 30 businesses. So when you talk about the hiring of young people, why did you not mention that how successful and how helpful, for example, in my riding, it equaled $1.1 million that small businesses could hire young people. So why did you leave that out of your testimony when you were criticizing the lack of hiring of young people?
We are fans of the Canada Summer Jobs program. Thank you very much for raising that. Obviously, in a 5-minute testimony, that doesn't leave an awful lot of time to go through every issue exhaustively. We are fans of the Canada Summer Job program. I will say, though, that small firms do find that it is often very difficult to access. And so it does tend to be focused more heavily on larger businesses, community groups and organizations. The most effective way that small firms say that they can, the most stimulative effect that they can have to help them create more jobs is to reduce the payroll tax burden. And that's why we were big fans when Liberal governments in the past introduced a youth hires program. It was a terrific program, well received by small business owners, light paperwork requirements, and we were so excited when your party committed as the centerpiece of your youth employment strategy to introduce a EI holiday for 2016, 17, and 18. And in fact, in the budget, it didn't even talk about the fact that this had been canceled. We had to go up and find out. They didn't even tell us that it was canceled, but it was then we found out later that it was replaced with an expert panel to study youth employment. So the Canada Summer Jobs program is a good one. It would have been far more powerful, far more employees would be back, youth would be back in jobs right now had you gone ahead with your own election promise to introduce the EI credit.
Thanks, but from your own testimony, it hasn't been canceled. It's looking at there's a committee looking at the implementation. So which is it? Is it canceled or is it looking at the implementation? So you have to be careful with your testimony.
You'd be in a much better position than me to answer that question. I will say when we've raised this with the officials, they have said it's been canceled.
Thank you, and I will, through the chair, just recommend that any small businesses that are looking to access Canada Summer Jobs should contact their MP, because I know I called the 18 pages of successful applicants in my riding, and I can assure you the majority of them are small businesses and not big organizations that are benefiting from this. So perhaps they just need to work with their members of parliament to find out how to access it.
Good advice.
And then in regards to Mr. Brackle, if I'm saying that correctly, you touched on about the innovation in research and development, and then the need in Canada to commercialize this. I've heard this a little bit, but could you elaborate a little bit more on what that means and how the government, and through this budget, I know innovation is critically important, but then how do we take that to the next step in terms of not just coming up with the ideas, but how do we put that into place and working in this economy?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that question. I mean, that's been the challenge for Canada. We have amazing universities and incredible research. The challenge is getting those new products to market, and so that's why we've said we want to build more venture capital in Canada. So we've got a booming venture capital market, but we want more of those startups, those companies that are creating these new technologies. And so one of the ideas we're looking at is that British Columbia has an investment tax credit of 30%. So if you invest in these types of venture capital, and it really appeals to a lot of investors. So we're hoping to pull more venture capital into Canada. The other idea we were thinking about in terms of some of the tax credits that would work to incent companies to actually do their innovation here in Canada is what a number of countries have, what they call a patent box or an innovation box, like the UK and the Netherlands have them. And so if you create an innovation or a technology here in Canada, then we'll tax you at a much lower rate. Revenues coming out of that innovation will be taxed at a much lower rate. And so it incents companies to actually do their innovation here. And so what we want the private sector to step up and to do a lot more innovation. That's crucial to the future of our economy. So it's about venture capital bringing new companies and creating them, and having the tax incentives so that big companies do it as well.
Great, thank you very much. I have a few. How much time? I'm going to leave it to the parliamentary secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just for the record, I'd like to correct. The minister did not say, nor ever suggested, that the CPP would be bankrupt. I could not. I was very surprised to hear that from the member, but I can assure you the minister would never have said that.
Point of order. You can't say that.
Well, I can say what I want.
Well, you're making...
my question is to Mr. Scholten.
Oh.
Mr. Scholten, go ahead, Mr. Champagne.
Mr. Scholten, you're aware that there is a voluntary process with respect to credit card fees that is going on. Can you enlighten the committee about its effectiveness and what you know about it?
Yeah, the voluntary agreement with the credit card companies was to result in an average credit card rate of 1.5%. The average credit card rate for all businesses. Our concern with that agreement is that prior to the agreement, Canada had amongst the highest credit card rates in the world. After that agreement, Canada still has amongst the highest credit card rates in the world. In addition to that, the average rate entails that some will be below the average and some will be above the average. I'll give you the example of Costco, for example, which has a 0 rating on their credit card fees. So as a result, because of the significant sales that Costco has, that average rate then is going to be impacted, and the retailers that are least likely or least able to negotiate a lower rate are going to be paying above 1.5%. So from a small business perspective, we do not agree that the voluntary agreement is going to have a significant impact on credit card fees.
Can you tell me about and you raised an important point, by the way. This is a very important question, that's why I want to focus on that. Tell me, we heard a lot about the Australian experience, and it doesn't seem to be one which has favored consumers. What do you know about the Australian experience, and what can you tell the committee about that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on in Australia that have to be differentiated here. First of all, their capping of fees, I believe, has been very effective and has resulted in supporting small businesses in that country. The issue that has really been controversial is the surcharging. And in terms of surcharging, consumers have been detrimentally impacted in that case, where some retailers have been charging more than what their actual credit card fees are, and taking advantage of that and making it a profit center. In that regard, as I said, it hasn't been a benefit to consumers, and that's not something here in Canada that our associations with Small Business Matters have ever been a proponent for. We are proposing or asking that a cap on credit card fees be put in place, but we are not asking for surcharging.
Okay. Thank you very much, you both. Mr. McCollum, 5-minute round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to drill into the effects of the tax changes, the small business tax changes of not fulfilling the promise that the government made to take it to 9% during the election campaign. There are many broken promises, as we know, $10 billion balanced budget in this term, those such things. But I think there's an elephant in the room, and I'd like to ask Mr. Scholten to tell us the names of the individuals, the name or names of the individuals who gave him the information, gave you the information to bring testimony here today, that you, through your initial remarks, you said that in the second budget, I believe, that they would be reducing this to 9%.
No, not that they would be reducing.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I didn't hear him say that anyone said that anything would be in the second budget.
2017.
2017.
Yeah.
He said it.
That's what he said.
Yep.
Would Mr. Scholten answer, and then we'll come back if there's a point of order or not?
Certainly. This was not something that was promised to us. This is not something that we know will be in there, but what we were told in talking with finance and in talking with small
Fine, I can
business.
stop you there. Who told you?
In the finance,
Who told you? What the names? The names of the individuals that told you.
the clerk in the finance office.
And what's that person's name?
I can't even recall. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I will.
I'd like to
provide it
move to
you.
a motion, Mr. Chair. I have the chair. I have the floor. I'll put my motion on the floor. You said, sir, it was the clerk?
Yep.
That the standing, I'll just read the motion, that the Standing Committee on Finance compels officials of the Department of Finance, as well as the Finance Minister and his exempt staff, to provide documents indicating any plans to reduce the small business tax rate during the course of the government's present mandate, including any correspondence or discussions with the Canadian Convenience Store Association or other industry associations indicating a plan to proceed with a small business tax reduction in 2017.
Do you have that written out? You don't have it?
Yes, I do. Right here.
Can we get a copy
Yes,
for
right
members?
here. Yep. We'll get it printed.
Can we come back to it then a little?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, we can come back to it.
Okay.
But the motion is, I just want to be clear on a point of order. The motion is on the floor right now, and it will be dealt with during this time.
If the motion is in order, it will be on the floor. I want to see it so that we can look at it to see if it is in order.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Then
I still
coming
have
back
time?
to questions, you've
Okay.
got 5 minutes, 4 minutes.
Okay. I'd also like, from my observation from Ms. O'Connell's questioning and assertion that the Canada Summer Jobs Grant has a wide swath of small businesses who benefit. My experience over 9 years now of reviewing the documents is that in the initial phase, I have less than 10 small businesses approved, with probably 90% or more of the organizations who are recommended for approval are public institutions, cooperatives, not-for-profits. And I would ask this without putting forward a motion, which I think would be fair, because I can go back in the records and show you my documents. In fact, this year, there were 26 small businesses not recommended, a handful that were, less than 10. And I, as you know, a parliamentarian can say, I would like those to be reconsidered and put into the mix, and they were. And every one of them got a student, because I believe every one of those 26 individuals, although they didn't fill out the application as well as some other professional organizations are able to do, they were not recommended. I made sure they got that. I think it would be appropriate, because I would very much like to see the members of this committee submit their summer jobs grant lists of individuals to verify what your comments were today, because I have not seen it under my term here, under our government, and this year as well. that small businesses are generally not approved.
Mr. Chair.
I think.
What is this?
But
I
Mr.
think,
Chair,
Mr. McColeman, you can make a statement, but you cannot question Ms. O'Connell.
Okay, I will question her after. I'll go to the witnesses.
Point of order from Ms. O'Connell.
Mr. Chair, sorry, with all due respect, the assumption is that you said I said that small businesses benefit from Canada Summer Jobs. Yeah, to put anything else in words into my mouth is inappropriate, and to suggest that is inappropriate.
We're not going to have a debate here among members. Do you have one quick question to the witnesses? You're going to be out of time.
Mr. Kelly, please comment on the propensity of businesses that are able to. I know you represent the professional side of small business, and this may not be a comfortable question, but the propensity. I come from the building industry, small contractor, small sub-trades, to go to the cash underground economy when the tax system is penalizing you.
I think most of the research that's been done on the underground economy shows that as tax rates rise, as the more punitive the tax rate is regarded by businesses, the more likelihood there, or by average citizens, the more propensity there is for some tax revenue to basically be foregone because things go underground. Canada doesn't have a huge problem with the underground economy at the moment, and that's a good thing. I also operate from the assumption that the vast majority of small business owners and average Canadians dutifully pay their taxes because they feel it's their responsibility, and nothing upsets a small business owner more than having their competitor working under the table. But I can say for sure that one of the most effective ways to reduce the size and scope of the underground economy is reducing taxation in general. And I think if the issue that our colleague from the Convenience Store Association brought up, I think shows that as taxes on tobacco were reduced, and that's not a position I'm advocating, but as taxes on tobacco were reduced, so was the amount of underground economy in that industry reduced.
5 minutes.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's quite spirited today. I wonder what everybody's drinking in their water. I'm going to start off with Alex. I was actually very disappointed that in your presentation that you didn't bring up the voluntary code of conduct that the card
I would ask the member to withdraw that comment. I think that's inappropriate. There's an allegation in there that I.
Oh no! I was in the spirit of camaraderie. I'll withdraw the allegation. How's that? Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Ron.
Let's get back to business, Mr. Severo.
Alex, I was just wondering about you didn't comment on the voluntary agreement that came into effect last year with the card issuers and the government of Canada. It's been in effect maybe I think just over a year. And you also the commenting on the regulation that came into effect in Australia. It was regulated. And then it was re-regulated, and then now it's re-regulated again because the measures put in didn't work. Also, in the fact the service charges that are the interchange fees that are in effect, they're actually different components. So it's not just the card issuers involved, but there are other processors involved where there's costs in there. So you fail to acknowledge that. I don't want you to comment, but I do want to point that out. But I do want to talk to Mr. Kelly because there is one thing you mentioned which I think, in my view, has a lot of credence. It is with regards to succession planning. In a some prior witnesses have commented that in Germany, if a family-run business transfers to, and anyone else can jump in when I finish, transfers to the next generation, the tax implications aren't the same as the tax implications here in Canada. And I think as a committee, if we look at tax simplification, that is a measure that we should look at because I also think that ties into productivity because people are spending time with their accountants and their advisors when they should be focusing on the successful running of their businesses and being able to transfer. It's analogous to owning a home. Your parent owns a home, they pass away, it's their first property. They can actually transfer that to their children without no tax implications. And I want to get your view on that.
I am thrilled with this question. This is exactly the kind of a focus that I would love the Finance Committee to take on, to analyze some of these very important areas of public policy. We did have better provisions in the past for transferring businesses from one generation to the next, but those were wound down. We know that there are concerns in the Department of Finance about potential abuse of some provisions, but I think the spirit of the question you were asking is very much our view too, and that is there are ways to accomplish this, to do this in a light fashion, to allow business transfers from one generation to the next without having massive rules, paperwork requirements, and taxation attached to it. And we have made some recommendations on that front. Your Liberal colleague, Emmanuel Dubourg, somebody that knows this very well, given his background as a CRA auditor, put forward, we think, an outstanding piece of legislation in the last Parliament, and we suggest that you and your government bring it forward again.
And on the EI premiums, my understanding is that they will be $1.88 this year, $1.88 next fiscal year, and then do the break-even components, it'll decline down to $1.61. So there will be some relief for all businesses across Canada.
Yeah, and just quickly on that front, if you look at slide 10 in my presentation, you're absolutely right that those are the numbers, that the EI rates for employers and employees will be falling starting in 2017. However, small firms, the previous government implemented something called the Small Business Job Credit, which essentially meant that small firms received a 15% reduction in their EI rates back in 2015. And again, your government repeated it for 2016, and we're very grateful to you for doing that. What that means, though, is that, in fact, in 2017, the effective rate for small businesses for EI goes up. And now, it goes up by one cent. So it's not a huge increase. I don't want to light my hair on fire on this one. Yep. But small firms are not going to get any reduction come 2017. In fact, they're going to see their EI premiums go up slightly.
And 30 seconds, Mr. Chair. An individual by the name of Jack Mintz presented to us, and he stated that he was very, very happy to see that we did not lower the small business tax rate.
Yes, we have debated Jack Mintz on many occasions. He operates from the assumption that the small business rate traps firms and keeps them small and doesn't allow them to grow to become medium-sized entities. Obviously, you can imagine, as a group representing small and medium-sized firms, we respectfully disagree with Mr. Mintz, although we do agree with his assertions on CPP. What I did want to say about that, though, is your party in the past railed against the Conservatives for reducing taxes for big business aggressively and not reducing taxes for small business. We wish you kept that spirit alive now that you're in government, because in fact what's happened is you've kept the reduction for big businesses at the 15% and have cancelled the reduction for small firms. And I would love it if this was a one-year pause and that you were going to reinstitute the tax reduction schedule next year. Every single person I've spoken to in your party and government has suggested that that's unlikely to happen.
I'm sorry, we're both done. I guess we'll have to wait next year and see. Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Breckel, just a couple of questions. I'm assuming that in the Canadian Chamber of Commerce you have a large number of small businesses that are also members of your association?
Absolutely, yes. The majority of our members are small.
Majority, that would be my thinking. Yeah. The presentation you made this morning, was that your presentation, or was that by the elected board of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, who are actually business people?
We have, we have resolutions passed by 2/3 of our members from across the country. So usually, the key things, our positions, say on Canada Pension Plan or on deficits and debt, are debated at our annual general meeting, and then a resolution is passed by 2/3 of our members.
Okay, but I asked you who was part of preparing your presentation this morning. Was it you, or was it the elected business people of your organization?
I think it was
representing the organization here, and I don't think it's a fair question to ask him who wrote the brief.
No, I'm asking who was responsible for the presentation here. Was it a personal presentation, or is it something that was drafted by many members of your organization? Because, and I'll tell you why. I've spoken to a lot of business people since the budget came out, and I don't know if they're members of the Chamber of Commerce or not, but I've certainly spoken to the Alberta Chamber of Commerce, and the views of the business community I've talked to did not reflect what I heard from you this morning. In fact, what you sounded more like a Liberal apologist to me than a Canadian Chamber of Commerce representative. So that's why I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Leipert, a few minutes ago we had a discussion between you and Mr. Sabero on something you didn't like been said, and I don't think it's fair you call a witness who comes to this table in good faith a Liberal apologist. I really don't.
I said it sounded like he was. I didn't say he was.
Okay.
Presentation sounded like a Liberal apologist to me, Mr. Chair. Anyway.
Okay, your question.
All right. Mr. Kelly, I'd just like to get a little bit more information relative to the small business, actually not small business, but to follow up on my colleague's question relative to the Canada Summer Jobs program. Do you have experience in that in terms of what percentage of your businesses might even apply for those?
Yeah, look, the Canada Summer Jobs Program is a good program. Our members do use it. They support the concept of it. We've certainly not had any major criticism of the Canada Summer Jobs Program whatsoever. The response that I was speaking when I was answering Ms. O'Connell's question, I was speaking about the fact that there appears to be a fairly large rejection rate for applications from small firms, and as we've reviewed the applications from the Canada Summer Jobs Grant in the past, it does appear that a disproportionately large number of approved programs are from the large business and not-for-profit sector. Now, I'm a not-for-profit association too. We don't use the Summer Jobs Program. We have paid internships at CFIB. But I will say we support the program. We would like to see an increased focus on small and medium-sized firms so that they don't get caught in the paper chase that sometimes these things can
Well,
become.
this was my first experience at actually looking at who had applied in my particular riding, and there were very few small businesses that were on the approved list. I don't know if others had applied or not, but it didn't appear to have, but there were certainly a lot of applications from nonprofit societies and that sort of thing. So I guess if you look at it's another example, I would suspect, that if the government, rather than handing out money to hire people, if they would have cut the small business tax and given the small business community the same kind of a break, would probably have accomplished the same thing, and it would have kept the government out of the middle of it and picking winners and losers. Is that fair?
There's many roads to Rome. We are supportive of the Canada Summer Jobs Program. We're supportive of the reduction in the rate for small business. We're supportive of the EI holiday that had been proposed for small firms. I will say, though, just to be clear, that we did not. I do want to make one thing clear. We have not. Our comments about the Canada Summer Jobs Program have not changed from your government to the new government. My observations have been the same, regardless of who has been in power.
Before I turn to you, Mr. Ouellette, I do have a question to Mr. Braun, because there's a real divergence in difference between testimony that Greg Meredith of the ADM for Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada gave here Tuesday versus what you gave. You said G3 will pay nothing for the wheat board or its many assets to the government or farmers except for the trust units. Mr. Meredith, when he was here, said there was basically, and this is not his exact words because I questioned him on this, that there was really virtually no assets. He did mention, I mentioned the rail hopper cars and the building, but his basic response is there was no asset, mostly debt. What's your response to his point?
Well,
is there assets
I'm
or is there
actually
not?
very pleased to hear that is his response. And I notice that the Conservative members haven't questioned me on this issue either. So I assume that they will be fully in support of a comprehensive audit to prove themselves correct. The fact is, I think that there was $145 million in a contingency fund that transferred from the former wheat board to the Ritz wheat board, as I call it. $145 million is not nothing. There were rail cars that have been bought and paid for many years ago. There is a building bought and paid for many years ago. There were various other accounts, uncashed checks and so forth that rolled into the next organization. And this government, I believe, the government of the day put $349 million into transitioning this entity so that it could be privatized. And in the privatization process, they've been acquiring new elevators at a very good rate, and they just recently announced the construction of a new terminal elevator at Hamilton. How can they say they have no assets?
My only point is, and we do have a recommendation 48 in our pre-budget report, but my only point is that somehow Canadians, and I think this committee, deserve an accounting on whether there's assets or whether there's not. And that would be fair in my view. So thank you for your response, Mr. Ouellette. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a very interesting. I've also heard, Mr. Brunn, that in fact actually some of the rail cars were actually mortgaged by the Canada Wheat Board, and there was actually very little value left in, as well as the building. But as you have said, I believe the federal government should provide Western Canadian grain and oilseed farmers with a full and transparent accounting of the dispositions of the Canadian Wheat Board assets since the Act was enacted, and make sure that you are satisfied and that it's done openly and publicly. And so, I agree with that recommendation 48, and I hope the government carries it out. But I have a few questions for Mr. Scholten from the convenience stores. Now, we talk about the high price of credit card rates that often are charged to convenience stores. It adds to the cost of doing business. It adds to the cost of consumers. And you represent 26,000. And we had a discussion about this previous, but you have a large base on which to perhaps use to create perhaps your own form of credit card. Because one of the problems with regulation is it actually stifles innovation. It's very inefficient in an economy. It reduces, it's just not sometimes not always the best way to run an economy through regulation, because how do you determine how much profit someone should make? And sometimes market forces are the best ones. And if you were in the market as providing your own form of credit, and Canadian Tire, I believe, does this, the Hudson's Bay has their own form of credit. They set up their own bank. Perhaps with your 26,000 members, you could cut yourself a better rate, challenging the credit card companies, MasterCard and Visa, as well as Amex to a smaller extent, and provide a better service.
Yeah, I would disagree. Our members have told us, from the large chains to the small independents across the board, that they have very, very little negotiating leverage with credit card companies. So when you have an organization like Couche-Tard, who has over 1,000 sites in Canada that aren't able to negotiate favorable rates that come anywhere close to what has been introduced in Australia or the EU, they believe that regardless of the leverage they have, they won't be able to get those rates. In terms of our association, we've taken the position that we are not a buying group. We don't come out and offer our members deals like that. Other trade associations are, but we believe by doing that, we, I guess, take away from our ability to then come to discussions like this on credit card fees, for example. So as a result of that, we've decided consciously that this isn't something we want to get into.
I just find it interesting today with the the new technologies that I think there are ways of offering a level of service. You look at Uber and the taxi industry and other sharing industries, and 26,000 small businesses it's not a small grouping of people. That is a major part of the economy, and I think if I personally believe if you work together, and perhaps you could work with government in order to see how this could be done, but I see a possibility there where people can create their own cooperative in order to do the work that they want to do, make better profits for themselves, reduce costs, and be more competitive. And perhaps at the end of the day, you'll challenge Visa and MasterCard to doing things a little differently, and maybe you'll see rates starting to come down because they'll be afraid of losing market share to your company, and you might be able to make profit on lending out money.
You are seeing that in the United States right now with many major retailers getting together to form a new payment system. In those cases, it's primarily the large retailers that are doing that who do not represent the small independent retailers. So that's the challenge we find in terms of leverage. Bringing together very different levels of business to try to come up with a group solution is very difficult.
I'm sure it is very hard. I was just wondering if you could describe a little bit more about illegal tobacco. You've talked about that a number of times. You came for the pre-budget consultations, and everyone talks about organized crime. So how does that relate then to Indigenous groups or First Nations groups that sell tobacco, and your position versus what First Nations groups say is their treaty right and constitutional right in order to sell tobacco?
Yep, it's a very good question. So from our understanding in discussions with the RCMP, the contraband or illegal trade of tobacco has been infiltrated by organized crime. They've also infiltrated the reserves and in many ways control the trade on reserves as well. So it's an issue that security, that police forces across the country have identified to us. On reserves, certainly within the treaty rights of First Nations people to control tobacco on reserve, we are not here to dispute that. Our concern is as the tobacco products come off reserve, they no longer have that protection and should comply with all of Canada's taxes and tobacco control regulation.
Now, from what I understand, having discussions with some... Thank you very much.
You are over time by a little bit. Before we'll go to Mr. Jones for 3 minutes, and then we'll deal with this motion before the witnesses leave. And before I go there, it is a standing order off the committee that we can't distribute documentation or motions unless they're in both official languages. We can suspend that rule if there's unanimous consent to do so. Is there agreement to suspend? No. So I will read out the motion then when we get to it. Okay, Mr. Jones, 3 minutes.
Jones, no problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was a small business person and ran it and talking to people business people throughout the country as the spokesperson for the NDP and as a former Chamber of Commerce executive director, people felt hostage by credit card fees. And we look around the world. I know in Europe and Australia, they provided relief to their members by reducing those fees, and government intervention's been key. I want to thank Mr. Scholten for bringing this forward. And do you think the current private members bill on credit merchant fees goes far enough? And I know while it further enables regulation, it doesn't actually require any legislation. So wouldn't you like to see something with a little more teeth?
That's a very good question. We would like to see something with more teeth. However, one of the reasons that we are supportive of this bill is because we'd like to see a lot more study on what is necessary or what is appropriate for credit card rates to ensure that retailers aren't paying too much, but also to ensure that there's a vibrant credit card system in Canada. From our position, we want consumers to have credit cards. Yep. We believe it gives them easy access to funds that they might not otherwise have, so it allows them to purchase goods and services when they're in our stores. So when we looked at what was in that private members bill and it didn't identify rates, specific rates, we thought that as long as it goes further in terms of studying what those appropriate rates should be, we are in support of it.
Great, thank you. All the parties agreed on the reduction for tax for small business, and people, we knocked on doors, we talked to chambers of commerce and the business community. I know the chair talked about maybe in future budgets that we might be able to see this reduction. The best part is that this table actually can make it happen in this budget and make recommendation to members. So I hope that they'll consider that. But we talk about trust and small business. We've seen corporate taxes drop from 28% to 15% over the last 25 years. And small business hasn't seen that kind of fair tax distribution. How is this in terms of building trust with small business? Because they're the front end, and they're the most intimate relationship government should have. Mr. Kelly, do you want to talk a little bit about the trust?
Yeah, look, this is a tricky issue for us. We are very keen as an organization to work cooperatively with the new government on a variety of fronts, and that stands today. I will say that there were two measures in the Liberal Party platform that we celebrated and cheerleaded during the election campaign, and that was the Liberal Party promise to reduce the small business rate to 9%, and the Liberal Party promise to reduce EI, in fact, give small firms an entire EI holiday for hiring young people for 2016, 17, and 18. The sad part was that both of those promises that we loved in the Liberal platform were cancelled in the 2016 budget. And I would love the committee, if there's any way possible, to bring back the tax reductions. You will have no bigger cheerleader than Dan Kelly and CFIB should you be reinstating the tax reductions that were promised by the new government in this budget. Thank you very much for that.
Both, then turning to the motion, and I will read it out. I might say, Mr. Scholten, there is a dispute on the issue, and there's also a dispute on what you said at committee. Were you operating from a written text?
I was. Yep.
We might need that in this discussion. So the motion, it is in order, and I can go to the rules to explain it why it is in order. The committee has this authority, but the motion is this: that the Standing Committee on Finance compel officials at the Department of Finance, as well as the Finance Minister and his exempt staff, to provide documents indicating any plans to reduce the small business tax rate during the course of the government's present mandate, including any correspondence with the Canadian Convenience Store Association or other industries associations indicating a plan to proceed with a small business tax rate reduction, and that the Finance Department also provide the names of any officials who have met with the Canadian Convenience Store Association since the 2015 election. End of motion. It is in order. You're moving it, I assume. You already did move it.
Yeah, I did.
It's on the table.
Yep.
Any discussion? Are we calling the question?
Mr. Chair.
McKinnon.
Well, I first of all want to thank the witnesses and for coming here today. And you've come in a spirit of constructiveness and done a very good job of advancing your point of view. And I regret that we've been tied up in procedural knots. I just do want to point out, I suspect the Liberals on the committee will be voting against the motion. I certainly will be. The budget that I have in front of me on the small business income tax rate says Budget 2016 proposes that further reductions in the small business income tax rate be deferred. If I look up the definition of deferral, it says the act of postponing to another time or place. I can only conclude from that it having been postponed, it will be revisited at a certain point, and that the government will be considering that on a more or less ongoing basis. As such, I don't know if Mr. McColman thinks he's found who shot JR or has solved one of the other great mysteries of life, but I regret this kind of procedural wrangling and hope we can move to the question.
Straight.
It's about a statement that you made today that indicated to our concern of whether or not you had been told something that MPs haven't been told. The budget document is silent on when the deferral is over. And indeed, the Parliamentary Budget Officer actually had to ask for more data from Finance Canada in order to get a better picture of what was in the budget. So it's very concerning to hear that something may be coming in 2017 that didn't appear in here or in the PBO. I think it's a valid use of the committee's time to determine whether or not simply there's any correspondence out there that may put us in a direction of understanding whether or not there is a plan to put it in, because it is material to the analysis of the projections for income, and it's material to the costing of what the deficits and the debt are to this country. It's a material fact that we should have, and if indeed it is the plan of the government, then they should inform MPs as they seem to be informing stakeholders. So if you do have written documentation, my understanding was that you had said a year. If you had just said it was deferred, then we wouldn't have perked up our ears. You said 2017, and that's what got our attention. So I think it's a valid use of our time. The Liberal members are going to try to say that we're being mean. We're not being mean, sir. We just want to get some information for Canadians, and we're doing it in great spirit. You don't get to respond. You don't get to respond. But I just want to let you know, please come in and see us on a nonpartisan, non-political basis anytime you want to talk about Canadian convenience stores, because we're here to listen. We're here to help. On this matter, we do want to understand whether or not the Minister of Finance's office is providing insight into other stakeholders as to what's happening in the future. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your presentation. Everybody else as well.
Mr. Jones.
Johns, Mr. Easter.
Sorry.
It's okay. The government ran on a platform of openness, transparency, trust. I think that when we hear from testimony from witnesses, and again, I want to thank Mr. Schulten for coming and for I think we all support the Canadian convenience stores. They're important to each one of our ridings in our communities. But I think this is fair to the public and certainly to members of Parliament when there might be information that we're not aware of. And I think in the spirit of transparency, I think it's essential that we follow through with this motion. And I hope that members across the floor honor their platform and their promises for transparency and building trust with Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. All those in favour of the motion as read? Opposed? Motion's lost. With that, I would like to thank all the witnesses for coming and making their presentations this morning. It was indeed a lively discussion by times. So thank you, and no doubt we'll be calling on you again. Thank you very much. We'll suspend for 5 minutes until the next witnesses come to the table. witness for the next session. We are going to have to, we're scheduled till 2 o'clock, but I think about 20 to 2 we're going to have to go to committee business to decide on witnesses if we could. With us at this session on an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22nd and other measures. We have, as an individual, Ian Lee, an associate professor, Antiquical Advisors Incorporated, Celine Bach, Caledon Institute of Social Policy, Ken Battle, and from the Fondation Le Fonds de Développement de la CSN pour la Coopération à l'Emploi, Julian Lampron. So welcome, and we'll start with you, Mr. Lee, of 5 minutes.
Thank you for inviting me, Chairman Easter. I'm a tenured associate professor at Carleton University Sprott School of Business. In the past 24 months, I've authored 2 peer-reviewed publications on Canada's retirement system in the Carleton University How to Spends, as well as an American Pension Journal with my colleague, Chancellor Professor B.J. Jog. And I've also co-authored 2 monographs this year on the pension system in Canada at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute think tank. Just before I go into my comments, I just want to shout out to your support staff who've been extremely helpful, because I didn't get the documents to them until yesterday, and they yet managed to pull it off and get them translated and printed. So a very gracious thanks. But first, my disclosures, and then I'll get right into it. I don't consult to anyone or anything anywhere in the world. I'm not a paid or unpaid, registered or unregistered lobbyist. I don't belong to or donate monies to any political party or NGO anywhere. Finally, I only source empirical data in my research from OECD government departments and IGOs such as OECD, IMF, and other international bodies. I do not source data from political parties or elected officials, NGOs or unions, because they're political or social activists with an agenda. Okay, I'm going to focus on pension reform, both OAS and CPP, in my short 5 minutes. One of the great urban legends in Canada today is the story of large numbers of impoverished senior citizens possibly reduced to eating cat food due to mean-spirited social policies. Never let it be said that we baby boomers, are terrible marketers. We have managed to convince large numbers of Canadians, in concert with some NGOs, such as CARP, of this false urban legend. Yet Stats Canada shows that the wealthiest cohort in all Canadian society are our seniors, and I will disclose in 18 months from now I become one of them. Well, the cohort with the least amount of assets and income are our young people, we refer to as the millennials. In a book published in 2012 that every member of Parliament and Senator should read, the following was said. This is a direct quote: "Crisis, what crisis? There exist persistent myths about the Canadian retirement situation. We think of our seniors as living in near poverty when the elder poverty rate is half of working Canadians." The book was called The Real Retirement. The author was Bill Morneau, the current finance minister. And the 2012 data in that book was and is correct. Demography changes very slowly. A country's demography does not change in 48 months. For anyone who argues, well, circumstances are different today than in 2012. In fact, elder poverty in Canada, since OAS, GIS, and CP were introduced in the 60s, has crashed and collapsed in Canada, not skyrocketed, as some have alleged. Per OECD pensions at a glance, Canada has one of the lowest rates of elder poverty at 7.2% of elders below the poverty line. And remember, the OECD are the richest, wealthiest countries in the world. This means we have one of the lowest rates of elder poverty on the planet Earth, 11th lowest. Can we do more to address the 7.2% of elders below the poverty line? Absolutely. By targeting them through an increase in the GIS, which your government did in this budget and which should be strongly supported, indeed I do. And by providing 100% survivor benefits on CPP to those seniors, typically elder females, who lack their own CPP and then their husband dies and the benefits drop. Now let's turn to those not yet retired. The McKinsey study on retirement readiness of Canadians showed that approximately 85% of Canadians not yet retired are pension ready, meaning 15% are not. And do note, because some may dismiss this as a consulting firm, this research largely duplicated and confirmed the peer-reviewed research of Professor Kevin Milligan at UBC, Professor Jack Mintz at Calgary, and Mr. Baldwin, formerly with the Canadian Labour Congress. To summarize these researchers, 1. The bottom quintile of Canadians experienced a significant increase in retirement of some 25% because they were previously low-income workers, and the OAS, GIS, CPP lifts them up. Secondly, most Canadians are pension-ready, while a minority of 15% are not. This suggests 3 startling conclusions. 1, the lack of pension readiness lies amongst some in the middle and upper middle class, not the bottom quintile. Second, pension reform should focus on targeted policies, not universal policies such as universal CPP reform, to address the 15% who are not pension ready in the middle and upper middle class. And concluding, finally, this suggests very strongly that universal CPP reform is completely unnecessary because 85% of Canadians are pension ready. Final issue, and then I'll wrap up, and that's the reduction of OAS eligibility back to 65. As several analysts argued in op-eds in the Globe and Mail, this was a terrible decision because it was not evidence-based. For those who read OECD regularly, and I certainly do, it has for several years urged OECD countries to increase the age of pensionability as we're living much longer. To deal with the canard that's been alleged that critics such as myself are suggesting that the pension system will bankrupt Canada, this is absolute nonsense. Canada is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, with one of the highest GDPs per capita in the world. I think that this was a straw man concocted to obscure the real issue. All resources are scarce and finite, not unlimited, and this means that decision makers such as you as parliamentarians must economize scarce resources by not squandering those scarce resources on less critical wants instead of more urgent needs. Indeed, I'll go further.
Sum up your
I've got one sentence left. Instead of 65 or 67, we should debate rolling OAS into GIS and making it completely targeted to those who need it. There's no empirical or moral justification in providing OAS to the upper quintiles in Canada, such as financially comfortable university professors, NGO and union leaders, or senior corporate types. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Buck, the floor is yours.
Bonjour, messieurs, dames. Merci beaucoup, Madame la.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to be here.
International Governance Innovation, and I've published this year 2 peer-reviewed policy briefs on the global clean technology industry as well as matters to do with innovation. I'd like to ask that the 2 synopses which we submitted in advance of today's hearings be read into the record, and they have been submitted in both English and French in advance of this meeting. On April 19th, I reported the findings and recommendations of Analytic Advisors' 2016 report on the global and Canadian clean technology industry, our 5th annual report. The global market for clean technology goods reached $1.1 trillion in 2004, up from $555 billion in 2005, representing a 7.5% annual growth rate. The industry is now globally worth 2/3 that of the automotive industry. Le marché des biens produits par l'industrie.
The goods and service market for the clean technology market has almost doubled between 2005 and 2014.
Market share. In that same period, Canada's ranking as a clean technology goods exporter fell from 14th to 19th place in the table of the top 25 global exporters. Et pendant cette période, notre part de marché a rétréci.
And during this period, our market share dropped by 35%, so we were 3rd last on the list of exporters. For the first time in 10 years, we saw a decline in income for all the industry.
Reported growth of 4 times that of the overall Canadian economy, but that growth has now stopped. Let me just briefly say that the clean technology industry added another 5,000 jobs last year, and it now directly employs 55,000 people in almost 800 firms. And many of these people are young people working at the start of their careers in positions that range from finance to engineering to manufacturing and global sales. The people in this industry are working in companies that are creating and scaling up technologies that protect our environment. Les entreprises de technologie propre aideront le
Clean technology businesses will help Canada reduce its GHGs by 30% from 2005 levels up until 2030 under the Paris Accord.
Recommendations in regards to Bill C-15. We support the addition of $50 million over 4 years allocated to Sustainable Development Technology Canada for the SD Tech Growth Fund, Tech Fund, and the $82.5 million over 2 years to Natural Resources Canada to support research, development, and demonstration of clean energy technologies. However, we strongly urge this government to implement programs for financing clean technologies where support is lacking for the rollout of the first commercial facilities. Addressing this financing gap is essential to stimulate the investments and create significant job opportunities directly contributing to meeting the government's goal of generating economic growth through expanded green infrastructure while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We also support the expansion of eligibility criteria for accelerated capital cost allowances to include electric vehicles, charging stations, and electric energy storage, but recommend that other sectors, including the advanced biofuels equipment and other carbon-reducing equipment, be included so that there is a level playing field. We also support the fact that regional development agencies will double their annual aggregate support for clean technology to $100 million per year from existing resources starting in 2016-17, and urge that this government increase the overall funding allocated to these agencies to support clean technology. We'd like to note that the OECD has assessed Canada's subsidies to fossil fuel industries at about $3 billion per year, that making quite a significant support to an industry which contributes 27% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. And note also that this budget does not establish a date for the phase-out of those subsidies to the fossil fuel industries. And with that, I'd like to conclude my remarks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Battle, welcome.
Thank you. One of the most important and thorny policy issues I've had to face in my long career is indexation, whether full or partial. In 1998, I wrote a report called No Taxation Without Indexation that explored the impact of partial de-indexation of the personal income tax system, refundable GST credit, and federal child benefits. Introduced into the tax transfer system in 1986 by the Mulroney Conservatives, partial de-indexation is instrumental to what I call social policy by stealth, the use of arcane and poorly understood technical changes to public policy which were imposed on Canadians without their knowledge, consent, or understanding. Partial de-indexation steadily and surreptitiously lowered the federal tax-paying threshold, imposed an annual inflation-induced hidden income tax hike on taxpayers at all income levels, weakened the GST credit, and eroded the value of child benefits, especially for low and modest income families. The following year, I did another piece which looked in more detail at what I call credit creep, and explained how partial indexation has affected all aspects of the tax transfer system. I, at that point, declared that we'll never get rid of partial de-indexation, but thank God it turned out to be wrong. And in the 2000 budget, Ottawa re-indexed the tax transfer system. So far, so good. De-indexation faded from view, and even the Harper government didn't try it, with the notable exception of its pet social program, the Universal Child Care Benefit, which was not indexed, although nobody seems to understand that. And then indexation popped up again from an unusual source, the New Canada Child Benefit, which is the last place I would expect to see stealth in operation. What happened was, in launching the program, there was no indication that it will be indexed until the year 2020, when it'll be finally indexed. Well, why did the federal government decide to defer indexation until 2020, especially since it's a policy which goes against its whole view of transparency in public policy. Cost is the only plausible explanation we can come up with. The Canada Child Benefit likely ended up being more expensive than originally estimated. Therefore, by de-indexing, it'll save a lot of money over the 5 years it'll be implemented. There are some remedies to this problem. The best is to index the program the way it should be. Another, another would be looking at the leakage of revenues through boutique tax credits that favor the wealthy. One can get money out of that. To make up for lost ground, we've recommended the federal government superindex the Canada Child Benefit starting 2020. The maximum benefit would be fully indexed and another amount layered on so that the total value of the program would be more than inflation. Ottawa did this, by the way, back in the 1970s when 90s, when it grew the Canada Child Tax Benefit. Caledon strongly supports the Canada Child Benefit, a program that we have advocated and worked on for many years. Its overall architecture is strong, but deferring indexation, although it's not the end of the world, is sad that the program has to start its life with the Achilles heel of de-indexation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Battle. Turning to Mr. Lampron, floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, thank you very much for welcoming us on this beautiful sunny afternoon. I'm very happy to be here today. I'm here to talk to you about Fonds d'Action, CSN. It was created in 1995 by the constituting order of the Assembly of Quebec, and it began in 96, and today it is the second largest labour fund in Canada. Our mission is to ensure the economic development, promote sustainable development, to create and maintain quality jobs, and to encourage people to save for retirement. I am here to testify to the importance of having reintroduced the Labour-sponsored venture fund tax credit. We are an innovative fund. We have always establish the very strongest requirements in governance, and we produce sustainable development reports corresponding to the exhaustive criteria of the Global Reporting Initiative. We're the first institution to do so. We have signed the Principles for Responsible Investment, and since 2007 we have been part of the Global Pact launched in 2000 by the United Nations concerning the principles to obtain the Millennium Development Goals. We would like to go further with regard to societal benefits. When we invest in companies, we not only look at the social and environmental impacts, but we also look at the socioeconomic training to the various businesses in which we invest. Sustainable development is at the very heart of our mission. It always has been, because among the environmental and social and economic aspects, we have decided to support all of them. We offer an activity that is very profitable for the government. A study conducted as at May 31st, 2015 will be distributed soon, and it shows that the fiscal and parafiscal receipts are $29.2 million, and we are the only people who can put this in place. This shows that our fiscal receipts with regard to the cost of tax credits are beneficial for Canadians with $1.08 in cost-benefit ratios. We maintain and create jobs, over 30,000 jobs with regard to the entire portfolio, and I'm talking about 150 businesses, and we have 800 in our portfolio. This tax credit allows Fonds d'Action to carry out our mission to encourage people to save for their retirement by using quality funds. Our average income is $48,000 per year for the people who invest, and without our fund, people would not have the same kind of retirement. We have 128,000 shareholders, and over 50% of them are women, and the annual assessment is should be a maximum of $5,000, but we only charge $2,800. We only use our savings vehicle. Therefore, this is important for an accessible retirement. And thanks to the support of the government's tax credits, we can offer these benefits. According to data for the Riches des Rentes du Québec, 47% of Quebec employers, that is 2 million people, participated, or rather did not participate in any sort of retirement regime. So these tax credits allow us to fulfill our primary mission because thanks to the savings amassed, we can invest in long-term perspectives with venture capital that benefits small SMEs. This allow us to expand our modernization, to ensure the merging of businesses, and to ensure the continuity of different businesses by managing next generation programs. The elimination of this tax credit had caused people to pull out of these kind of vehicles, and given the leverage effect, we can offer important sums for a key investor. So I'd like to thank the government for having reinstated the full this tax credit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lampron. Then we'll go to the first round of questionings, and I think we're going to cut back to 5 minutes in order to get to business. Mr. Graywall, 5 minutes you have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses appearing today. My first question is to Madame Bach. Our government has made a commitment that the economy will grow and not at the expense of the environment, but hand in hand, that a strong environment will lead to a strong economy and vice versa. Recently, the Ministry of Innovation had an op-ed in the Toronto Star advocating that innovation should be a Canadian value, that in every aspect of economic decision-making, innovation should be at its core. Now, in a Toronto Star article that you wrote, you had a really interesting point that I wanted to get some more clarification on. There is very much a need, though, to connect the dots, because if we just do more innovation, we get the same results as we did in the past, which is a lot of promising companies, but none that grow up from here. And I thought that was a really interesting comment, and saying that the whole purpose of innovation is to grow companies, to change the way we're doing things. And you're saying that we also have to recognize that we may be innovating a ton, but we're not getting empirical results in the long term. So if you could comment on that, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So as I'm sure all of the members of the committee are aware, Canada has been thinking for some time about productivity and why Canada's productivity figures are not at the level that we would like them to be in OECD rankings, for example. And this has led to some fairly serious consideration about matters to do with innovation. Productivity is a result of investment in new ways of doing things, and that may be technology, or it may be management processes, or it may be capital. In Canada, we have a fairly concentrated economy, and we also lag in a number of different ways in terms of regulation. So the competitive forces at play are relatively low, and our regulatory framework is also not as robust as it is in some countries. And a rising price on carbon is an example of that. So absent robust competitive forces to stimulate innovation, and absent where there are market failures, regulation to stimulate the take-up of innovation, we will not have the benefit of the investments that we're making in innovation. I would also say that other countries, Israel included, have very good economic information on the role that relatively small firms play in their global competitiveness through exports and other things. I would suggest that we may want to consider reporting on R&D by size of firm as well as exports by size of firm, so that we have macroeconomic information to improve the formation of capital markets and our decision making in the private and public sector.
Thank you. My next question is for Mr. Battle. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just actually want to thank you for submitting your presentation. It was actually one of the more objective ones I've read since being on the committee. You pointed what was good in the budget, you pointed what was not so good in the budget, and you also pointed for areas for improvement and constructive criticism. In conclusion, you wrote, besides, it appears that the government truly appreciates the value of social investment. For the next few years at least, social policy is back. And you did rave and spoke about in your commentary about the Canada Child Benefit. And you also at the same time in your brief said that it was not really, like the universal child credit previously implemented was not really tied to childcare, and that the Canada Child Benefit really addresses two concerns. At its core, it gives more money to those that need it the most, and it will help alleviate 300,000 children out of poverty. But then you went on to say that this is only good if we index it to inflation going forward. Can you further elaborate on some of those comments?
Yeah, thank you for your comments. It's nice to hear that people read our work and that we are nonpartisan. Let me just give a specific example to answer your question. I mean, before I do, first, the failure to index the new child benefit blew me away. I mean, I never could have thought that a new government would do that. So I'm being quite critical about it. Since we know, we've seen over the years when governments of all political stripes have tried indexation or de-indexation, that it ends up with pretty bad results. The one about the new child benefit, though, is, let me give an example. It's just simple arithmetic, but it's very powerful. In July 2016, when it starts, the Canada Child Benefit will pay a maximum of $6,400 a year to a low-income household. That's a very hefty amount of money. If inflation were to run at an annual rate of 2%, which it does these days, the purchasing power of that benefit will fall in the second year to $6,272. By 2020, the real value of the benefit will be only $5,903 in constant 2020 dollars. It doesn't sound like much to people, but it really adds up. That's the problem with indexation. It's quite sneaky. And it's that way. The only reason the governments do that is to save money. So we were not happy about that aspect of it, and what we've asked for is an explanation of how the child benefit will be rolled out. Excuse me, I've got a cold.
Sorry, not to cut you off. I think I only have. Can I make one comment, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that in your press release on the budget, you made it a point of saying that there's a weakness in Canada's retirement programs, specifically that the Canada Pension Plan is not doing enough to support retirement because the whole concept is that it would supplement private pension programs. And
short comment.
It was almost done. Okay.
Ms. Raitt, and maybe Mr. Battle, you can come back to that in another question.
Sure,
Ms. Raitt, we're well over time.
Colleagues' questions. Mr. Battle, did I hear you say in your remarks that you think indexation will happen in 2020?
No.
The government has said that in 2020 they will begin indexing it, yes.
So when did the government say that? Because I have the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report here that goes out to 2020, and it says that spending on the new benefit is stable as the CCB will not be indexed. So I'd like to get an understanding of when the government said this. Perhaps you can give me a press release, or?
So that was part of the mystery of the whole thing. On budget night,
yeah,
a reporter from, and I can't remember which newspaper, reported that it was not going to be indexed until 2020. I talked about that with my colleague Sherry Torsman,
Yeah.
and we couldn't believe that this could be true. So we called some people at PMO that we know,
Yeah.
and they said, yes, wait until the Budget Act comes down and you'll find out
Yeah.
clearly what's going to happen. So we're sort of in limberland. We don't
Yeah.
know what's happened to it, and we think it's important that the government make that clear,
Yeah.
so that that people can understand and criticize it or whatever.
Yeah.
But so far, it's kind of a mystery.
It's interesting, and I appreciate you telling us that you did have these phone calls with PMO and assurances were given, because I did go and take a look at the actual supplementary information that's on the budget.gc.ca website, and it is silent on the issue of whether or not it's indexed, but it only has 2 years. So then I turn to the PBO report, and then I find that it's very clear, even in 2020, 2021, sadly for you, there's no indexation, and the PBO is actually relying upon that in order to show that the government's books are in good stand over that period of time. So I appreciate you sharing with us the information, and we may be following up on that in some fashion at some point. Mr. Chair, I'll give you some notice that we may be asking some PMO folks to come in and talk to us about what kind of assertions they're giving with respect to indexation on the child care benefit. So I do appreciate the work. I did have a question for Professor Lee, Dr. Lee, that had to do with respect to, okay, you did put out something very controversial, I have to say. It is on your deck. And you said that perhaps what we should do is amend the concept of universality and move towards more targeted measures. So get rid of everybody getting it. You only get clawed back at about $70,000 and move it into more along the lines. But you also said that don't believe that the CPP is going bankrupt, that it's the Canada Pension Plan Fund is in good stead. I guess I'm just wondering, and perhaps it's pretty stark. The Liberal government has decided to move away from universality and the child care side.
That's right.
Can you tell me why they should do the same thing on the senior side?
Right. By the way, I may have didn't speak well or clearly. I wasn't referring to CPP. I was referring to old age pension.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
I was talking about CPP.
And I was making reference to the criticism of the criticism because the PBO said, what are people talking about? OAS is sustainable. Well, people like me and Jack Mintz never said it was unsustainable.
Yeah.
The issue is not, is it going to bankrupt Canada? Of course it's not going to bankrupt Canada. We're an enormously wealthy country, and I'm saying that as someone who travels around the world teaching over 100 times in developing countries. I'm going to be in Poland in August, China in October, and we are fabulously wealthy.
Yeah.
My point was, it obscures the fact that resources are scarce, and you, the decision makers, the parliamentarians, when you have a choice between using, I called it squandering public resources on something that's less essential versus more essential, you should always focus on the more essential, not the less essential. That was my fundamental point on that. Yeah. And I just want to refer you, and again, I do want to thank the Clerk of the Council for being able to get these slides to you. And I just want to reference, if you can take a look at slide 9, page 9, and it's from Jack Mintz, but in turn it is based on Finance Canada, income replacement percentages. And what I argued in my paper in How Ottawa Spends, which hasn't yet been physically published, I argued there's really two pension systems in this country. And people don't really realize it. We think there's just one big pension system. Yeah. And I've said we have a public pension system for people in the bottom 2 quintiles. Yeah. And I say that empirically, statistically, they receive most of their income in retirement from OAS, GIS, and CPP. That's an empirical statement, whether we like it or not. Whereas the top 3 quintiles, which is the top, the upper middle, and the middle, receive declining. Look at that graph on page 9. You get down to people in the top quintile, and it's 10% of their income. Yeah. So my point is, we have de facto, not legally, but de facto, 2 different pension systems. One for low-income people, the bottom, which I define as the bottom 2 quintiles, who absolutely need the public system. And I'm not suggesting taking it away from them. In fact, I'm suggesting giving them more. And taking it away from university professors and NGO and union leaders and corporate leaders and Conrad Black and people, high-income people who shouldn't be getting
Mr.
OAS.
Lee, one last question. Is there any truth to the assertion that the reason why it's okay to move from 67 years of age to 65 is that those who live in the lower income class actually don't live as long? And that's why it's not as expensive. Is that a valid reason, do you think?
I'm not sure if it's a valid reason. If you're asking me, is there empirics on that? I've seen it. I can't quote them at my fingertips, but people, life expectancy is correlated to income. And the American data is very clear on this, and so is Canadian data, that the more educated and the more higher the income, the longer the longevity.
Right. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Finance Committee.
Thank
Floor
you.
is yours. 5 minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, and thank you to our witnesses for coming today. I did want to moments talking about something that didn't come up in any sort of focused way in the presentations, but in terms of the changes to EI in Bill C-15. This is obviously something that we've heard quite a bit about. While obviously there are some very welcome changes, the changes certainly don't go far enough in terms of making a difference for many working Canadians. And I'd like to first direct my question to Mr. Battle. Given, I know, I mean, I'm familiar with some of Caledon's work around the ineligibility surrounding EI and the fact that fewer and fewer Canadians are ineligible. And I'm thinking of a report that you put out in December 2011 around fixing the hole in employment insurance. And I'm wondering, specific to C-15, I mean, one of the concerns that has been raised is obviously there are regions that have suffered significant unemployment in the last 2 years that are excluded. We hear today that finally the Liberal government is seeing the need to include Edmonton as one of those regions. We're hearing some different reports in terms of southern Saskatchewan, which has also been hit hard by the drop in the extractive sector. But we still know that many regions that depend on seasonal work, including in Quebec and the Atlantic, are still ineligible, and it creates the black hole or le trou noir that we know of. And so there are many Canadians that are hurting, many Canadians who have paid into EI that aren't able to access it. And I mean, I know in your report you talk about 55% eligibility. I guess that was in 2011. Now we're down to about 40% eligibility. And I'm wondering if you could speak to perhaps what, is this a serious issue? Should we be taking it more seriously? Should we be fixing the EI program in ways to be more responsive to current crises that Canadians are facing, but also a shifting job market and particularly the rise of precarious work? Any thoughts would be welcome on that.
There's two key criticisms that we make about EI, and I think EI is an incredibly important part of our social security system, and certainly is one of the social programs that is most in need of reform. The regionalization aspect of EI is, we think, a bad idea. It leads to the kinds of inequities that we're seeing now in various parts of the country. What's needed is to increase the earnings-related ratio for EI so that it is a more generous program and could be developed over the years so that it doesn't have these regional aspects to them, which we think are quite pernicious, whether you know it, like it or not. The other problem that you just touched on is the development of a new labor market, marginal work, the whole syndrome of problems that people have joining to the labor force. And we decided that on this one, you can't fix it with EI as a social insurance. We're always going to have these kinds of inequities that we see, that we talked about. So we suggested a kind of an experiment to look at a new program, an income-tested program, that would be geared to people that just can't make it in the normal, or in the normal, it's not a good word, but in the usual labor market. That there has to be another way of helping those people, and they're certainly never going to meet the requirements of a social insurance-based program. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to look at from a broader point of view. But the unfairness to the regionalization thing, I think, is palpable and something that has to be fixed.
And I appreciate that point. Of course, there are a number of organizations, whether it's the labor movement and others, that speak to the need for a universal threshold, recognizing that that the regionalization, as you pointed out, is problematic and that there are major inequities. Do you believe that looking at something like that would be helpful? And I take your point about how the shifting labor market speaks to a whole other discussion we ought to be having. But in the meantime, should we be looking at a more universal threshold for EI?
The new program that we mentioned in our report wouldn't be universal, and it would be income tested, so that which is the mechanism we're using now for more and more social programs is income testing. So I'd have to think more about a universal program.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Nikki, we're out of time. Mr. Sabero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to today's panel for your insightful comments. I want to touch on everyone a little bit, so I'll try to make my comments quick. Mr. Lee, have you run the numbers on estimating the policy of 100% survivorship benefits for poor or low-income seniors when their spouse passes away?
Right.
Have you run the numbers on that?
I haven't. A lot of my data is synthetic. In other words, I'm drawing on someone else, and of course I fully footnote it. So I'll specifically cite the source. It was Professor Jack Mintz, and I think it was January of 2015, published its working paper at the University of Calgary. They did a deep dive into the numbers and asked the question, a very good question, who are the 7.2% of Canadians under the poverty line? And what they found, they are overwhelmingly what I call elder women. That is, women in their 80s and 90s, yes. Because it was my late mother's generation. They stayed home in the 50s and had children and raised their children at home, worked in the home. It was very hard work. Yeah. But my point is they didn't have a pension. Then their husband dies because men don't live as long as women, and then their pension drops down to 60%. Jack Mintz crunched the numbers. I'm going to answer your question very succinctly. Yeah. He said for $5 billion we can eliminate elder poverty in this country, okay, the 7.2%, by doing that.
Yeah. And to your comment, I have in my riding, we ran some tax clinics, and we did have some elderly folks come in, and there was that noticeable trend of specifically women. Our government has introduced, and it's in Bill C-15, the increase to the guaranteed income supplement of up to $947, and it'll benefit folks that make up to, I think it's $8,500 in the prescribed income level. So I think that's going to benefit 900,000 people,
yes,
the majority of which are single seniors and women.
Yes.
They tend to outlive us men for whatever reason. And then second question, on you talked about OAS, GIS. When those two programs were brought in place, and they're the bedrock of our social fabric for many millions of Canadians, they were brought in place to help the poorest of the poor, and they are funded through directly tax revenue, government tax revenues. There has been some discussions on potentially looking at changing clawback levels, changing the level, because a two-person
yes,
senior family making $300,000 a year combined can theoretically still qualify for old age security.
If you're asking, should it be reduced? I've certainly advocated, the clawback I think now is 110 or 113 or something. Yes. Paying old age benefit, a lot of professors will have pensions of over 100. Paying them old age, I just think this is immoral.
No, thank you.
So the clawback should come down.
If I can move on to Mr. Lampron, the labor-sponsored tax credit, how many your members would benefit from it in Quebec?
Merci de votre question.
Thank you for your question. Since the announcement in the budget, we're seeing growing numbers of shareholders who are coming back into the fold. There are many ways of purchasing shares or joining. There's a withholding on your salary. So there's an odd amount automatically deducted from each paycheck. There's the lump sum amount. what we're observing is people who decide to participate in our program. It's really the withholding, the deduction from the salary. That's what's mostly used in the middle class.
So thank you very much. Mr. Battle, if I can move on to yourself. In the mid-1990s, it was under former Finance Minister Paul Martin that we got rid of what was called inflation creep. I think that was the term that I used and that I saw. So I do recognize your concern with the CCB. I also think the CCB is a very powerful instrument in eliminating child poverty. 300,000 children will be taken out of poverty by 2016, 2017 versus the last fiscal year. So I do recognize your comments on inflation creep. It was one of when Mr. Martin brought it in his budget, I think it was 96 or 95, one of the largest tax cuts for Canadians ever, with introduction of inflation bracketing, if you want to call it that. So I do recognize that. My question is there anything else that, in your mind, that we could quickly do to pull even more children out of poverty?
Well, first and foremost, index the system, not to, of course, because it's, otherwise you're going to be losing ground all the time. What we would like to see is that the child benefit, which is already the new child benefit is an extremely powerful instrument, that it be increased over time. Invested in over time. Not everything could be solved by income programs. Don't get me wrong. There's a whole range of other things that low-income people need. But the child benefit is incredibly important.
Okay. And my last comment for Celine, question actually, commercialization. There's innovation, which Canadians aren't that bad at, but there's this commercialization which we could be a lot better at. Can you care to comment on that?
So commercialization is where you actually get money for what you invented, and you get to employ people to do that. I think Canada's in the process of going through a major economic restructuring. If we think of Canada as a corporation, the lines of business are going to have to change over the next little while. We won't be able to rely on oil and gas to the degree we have up until now. And that's going to mean that we're going to need to be able to grow new companies, and they are therefore going to need to commercialize. What that means is they need to be able to finance scaled up instances of their solutions. So examples might include new ways of deploying technology in cities through infrastructure spending, new ways of deploying technologies in public procurement, new ways of solving environmental problems within our large industries, the forestry, oil and gas, mining industries. In each case, those deployments will have relatively little technical risk, but they'll still have financial risk. And that means that the banks will not easily be able to underwrite those deployments, whether through project finance or through just basic working capital loans. And so in order for us to be able to commercialize new innovation in all parts of our economy, I have proposed, and I'm on the record as saying, we need something like the CMHC for the low-carbon economy. We need to be able to backstop risk so that we can deploy innovation where, in a commercial way, where banks, the fact that it's been deployed 3 or 4 times is not good enough for a bank. They need 10 times. And so to commercialize, we need to stand behind these deployments and offer insurance across all different sectors, whether those are municipalities or the private sector. So just as we did when mortgages were new, we need to do the same thing again today so that we can actually deploy and commercialize our solutions.
Thank you for your commentary.
Thank you, both, Mr. McColman.
Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. First for Mr. Battle, I'm just on the Caledon Institute of Social Policy website, and I'm just going to read off the one posting here. And it's talking about the Canada Child Benefit, and I'm just following up on what my colleague was asking you about, and it says the Canada Child Benefit, it won't be indexed to the rate of inflation until 2020, and that's posted on your website.
Right.
And just following on the questions of my colleague, would it be possible, you explained that this is a result of a news report and then further conversations with persons at the PBO on this matter. Would it be possible for you to give us the names of the individuals at the PBO you spoke with? PMO, sorry, PMO, not PBO, PMO.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's good. So you'll provide those to the committee?
Sure.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Lee, or Dr. Lee, I want to go to your presentation and the deck that you provided. But there's two kind of underlying questions. Number one is, and I think I know the answer, but I want you to confirm it, that your research as a scientist, as a person who does proper statistical analysis, is it considered scientific in the sense of what people would say is proper science in academia?
That's an interesting question. I'll be very straightforward. I pride myself in not manipulating. Some professors, modify, massage the data. My little bit flippant phrase is I photocopied the StatsCan data. Now it's a bit flippant, but meaning by that, I don't massage it, I don't transform it, I don't manipulate it. The value added on my research is finding the data, because drilling down into OECD and IMF, you can spend all day long for the rest of your life and 10 lifetimes doing it, I assure you, having spent doing that. And so if you're asking me, is the data absolutely sourced reliably from StatsCan or OECD? Yes. So is the data reliable? Well, is StatsCan reliable and OECD reliable? I believe they're the gold standard, as well as these other international bodies like the IEA or the WTO. And so my value add is in finding the data. There's a gold mine of data in these. And that's why I provide the full URL for every data source I find. So if anybody wants to challenge it, they can go then and argue with OECD or IMF or StatsCan and so forth.
Yeah. So in kind of layman's terms, it's scientific evidence that you've provided through your testimony here today.
Yes.
Thank you. Further to that, I'm a resident and I represent a riding in Ontario, and this urban myth that you talk about, I found I was on a panel, Chamber of Commerce panel locally, and this issue come up, questions about the Ontario pension plan that's being devised right now by the Liberal government of Ontario. And when I presented the numbers, because I used some of your numbers that I had researched before going in, and I used the 85% number, the 85% of people who are
right.
pension ready.
Yes.
They've prepared themselves for their retirement and they're ready to go. And then you further subdivided that group down to about 7.5%, which, and it was it was not received by, of course, the person who had to defend the Ontario government's position on this matter as being at all reliable, or where did that information come from. And I'm going to be very pleased to provide him with this information you've provided today. But the point I want to make is, can you give us your candid views on why this urban myth is being received and believed at the level it is in this country?
I can provide you and the committee with those sources, by the way, and I will tell you right off the top, it came from the McKinsey. It also came from Professor Jack Mintz, his published research, as well as Professor Kevin Milligan at UBC, the Vancouver School of Economics. That's just to name three, and there are others who have done parallel research to verify that, to document. And by the way, there's some debate. Some say it's 17%, some say it's 13%. It's somewhere between 13 and 20% of Canadians who are not yet retired, who are not pension ready. And then you can get into the definition is provided. What does pension ready mean? Right. But to answer your question, I think it's partly because some NGOs, and I'm specifically CARP, and I've been on panels debating them, and they have raised this profile, and it's a nice story. And historically, it was true. From the beginning of our country until the late 60s, the face, my late mother used to tell me this all the time, the face of poverty in Canada was elderly. Yes. And it was after that, today, the face of poverty is not elders, it's young single mothers. Not all single mothers, but about 20% of single mothers are poor. That's the face of poverty today. Mm-hmm. Elders, and as I said, I've got the stats from StatsCan showing the wealth. The wealthiest cohort in this country are elders.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to actually, go back to Madame Back about the clean technology. And one of my questions was going to be, maybe some of the biggest hurdles in actually turning this technology, or to have Canada as a leader in clean technology and in the economy in that way. And then you mentioned financing throughout your testimony and even some of the questions. So can you point to other countries where you think they're doing this quite well? I think a lot of countries are probably right now competing to be the leader in green technology, because with the various like Paris Accord and things of that nature, and countries needing to reduce their emissions, I think everybody wants to be that leader that other countries are going to draw on. But do you see if financing is a major hurdle, and I understand your points that were made, can you point to other countries or ideas that you think are kind of leading in your opinion?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So, as I mentioned, the idea of public backstopping through some sort of institutional mechanisms like a CMHC for the low carbon economy. That's really a domain called blended finance, and blended finance is where a little bit like the World Bank does, where the World Bank stands to take up the part of risk which the private sector will not take. And so in developing countries, the World Bank provides that mechanism, and there are countries who have for years done an excellent job at mitigating the part or the financing, the part of financing which the private sector will not take up. Examples of countries which do that really well are Germany, Japan, to some extent the Netherlands. These are all countries that have institutional mechanisms. In Germany, there is the KfW, which is a combined, it's a combination of CEDA, EDC, BDC, and what some people call a development finance institute. So it brings all those things together, and it's one of the reasons why Germany is so successful as a major exporter of solar panels and other forms of clean technology. Denmark is a country which has also realized that one of the specific characteristics of clean technology is it's very high capital, and so Denmark has developed a program within its export credit agency, our equivalent of EDC, whereby they will backstop what the private sector will not be able to backstop.
Thank you very much. And following up to Mr. Battle from my colleague, Mr. Grewal was trying to get to this question, and I'm very interested in your response. In regards to the submission you wrote in regards to the private pension plans have not actually grown as significantly as in the past, and I think it's kind of contrary testimony in terms of what we've heard in terms of the security of people retiring and having enough income. Do you want to maybe elaborate in terms of the need for, or do you feel there's a need for an expansion of CPP, or is there some other coverage that you think should be looked at if you feel that the coverage of employer-sponsored pensions are falling?
Okay, that's a lot. Just a couple of points. One comes on from my colleague, Professor Lee here. When we were looking at pension reform, pension reform goes in waves, about every 10 years there's a push for pension reform, and then something moderate usually is done, and away we go. One of the proposals that we made some years ago was for a seniors benefit. This was the idea here was we would integrate existing seniors benefits into a single income tested program. So it would be old age security, guaranteed income supplement, age credit, pension income credit. They would all be put together based on a measure of net income, family income, and then you would have a very strong program which could adjust to changes in the economy. It's also a very fair program. It compared to the current one, it's simpler to operate. Anyway, it didn't go anywhere, and that was the last sort of big push for reform. The other one is just to mention to Caledon, we've called for a 50% increase in the CPP, so that it could better meet the needs of especially middle-income seniors.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Leipert has, I think, one question, and then we'll go to business.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a fairly brief question predicated by a very brief comment to Professor Ada Lee. I'd like to ask you some questions, but I'd only be doing that for sheer political purposes, because everything you said today is exactly what I said in my budget speech, including the real retirement and the fact that the old age security was not science-based as this government can. But my question is actually for Ms. Back. We've had several green outfits come before this committee and have made a statement that I want to pursue just very briefly. And the statement is that it's a blanket statement, sort of like the sun comes up in the east, that there's a $3 billion annual subsidy provided to the fossil fuel industry. And I look here in my favorite Google website that says a subsidy is a sum of money granted by the government or a public body to assist an industry or business so that the price of a commodity or service may remain low or competitive. Can you give me 3 or 4 examples of something that would fit that description that is in that statement you made today? Because if you can't give me examples, I'd like to know if that's something that is fair to continue to say. And I'm not talking about tax incentives. I'm talking about exactly what Google says subsidy is, a handout of government money to the oil industry. So give me 2 or 3 examples.
Well, sir, I have to say that the definition that is being used in this in this reference is a definition from the OECD. It's not from Google. So I have to take the OECD's as being perhaps the one that I would refer to. I mean, I can come back to you with other examples. No.
You made the statement.
Yes,
that the fossil fuel.
It's the OECD's reference figure.
No. But if I'm going to make a statement, it
Yes,
would
sir.
be. I think it's incumbent on me to be specific on how that. If I'm asked a question on how I came up with those, give me some examples. And I can never get examples of organizations like you that come here.
The OECD agreed to a definition that I think did include fiscal measures, and so those measures are those that are included, and I regret to say that they're not consistent with Google's definition.
No, but okay.
We'll call it there, and thank the witnesses for their presentations and their information. Thank you very much. We'll immediately go to committee business if we could. Just to first then explain where we're at on committee business, if I get everyone's attention. Okay. The clerk indicates on the witness list that we have provided, if we're going to fill all the time frames we agreed to, given the rate of decline of people that can't come due to not enough time or other things on, we would actually need about another 20 additional witnesses on the law of averages. So do parties want to come up with some more witnesses, or do we want to cancel one of those meetings, or do we want to bring officials in at one of those meetings? Mr. McKinnon.
Just a point of clarification. I think we were left with 4 divisions of the Act. We were left, before we broke the other day, there were officials here for technical briefing.
We're left with
and we were left with 4 or 5 divisions. And when was it envisaged that those officials would come?
What we were planning on doing with officials, and now that we know that the minister is doing committee of the whole on the 30th, so we can't start the bill till after he's done. We were planning on meeting with the minister on the 30th from 3:30 to 4:30. And then we were going to come back and do those officials. If we so decided, due to the availability and witness list, we could do our officials. We could do those officials in another time slot and start clause by clause for an hour, because I do think we have to adjourn at 5:30 because people need some time to prepare for the session with the minister that night. So that would take an hour or an hour and a half in terms of a time slot.
So one more question. So I think we had envisaged next week meeting on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yes. Yes, 16th, 16th, I think 17th, 18th. On Thursday is the Minister of Revenue.
Revenue, indeed. So could we not, if everyone's agreeable, bring those officials back if it's convenient for them and all of us to conclude on the technical questioning, technical aspects of the bill, and as such dispense with that part of our examination instead of doing it during or adjacent to the clause-by-clause examination?
Go ahead, Mr. Library.
I just wanted to ask, have we actually confirmed more witnesses for any specific session yet?
Yes, we have. And
so can you tell us when those are
on May 17th, at the session on May 17th, which is from 11 to 2, we've confirmed not 11 to 12:30. We've confirmed 2, and invites are to 3 others.
So we have, if we decided that that would be the extent of the witnesses, then we would have an hour and a half after that?
Yes, then from 12:30 to 4 to 2 o'clock on the 17th, we have 2 invited in that time slot and have space for 4 more.
So the 17th is effectively taken up with witnesses?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The ones who, like, there's some couldn't come this week and they'll be re-invited. So some of them may fill in on the 17th or the 18th.
No, but it sounds like to me that one way or the other you've got that 3-hour slot filled partially in each case, and it'll probably be filled. Yeah. So then we're now talking the Wednesday, the 18th.
From 3:30 to 6:30.
So could we not do the officials, and assuming we don't, I'm reading this right, and we're not going to invite another round of individuals, could we not do the officials during the Wednesday time slot, finish with that technical examination of the bill, so that that's out of the way prior to clause by clause, and then conclude on witnesses?
Ms. Reid?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to follow up. My question to officials on the child care benefit that we all wanted to get to the bottom of is actually a question about whether or not the adjusted family net income definition will include child care benefit, because I've done a little bit more research, Wayne, that, Mr. Chair, the officials we need to have are justice officials, because they're in charge of the federal guidelines with respect to child support payments, and that would be the most benefit. They're the people who can actually answer the question for us. So I would submit that if officials are coming, I would like somebody from justice who has the understanding of the child care support benefit table.
Yeah, I'd endorse that too.
Okay.
Is that okay with
you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're in circles.
So among the officials, then we will ask for justice officials who know that issue.
Be great. That would be great.
And
So-
Susie knows that.
So have we confirmed that there are no witnesses on the 18th scheduled?
No witnesses scheduled as yet.
And that would be the officials' 3-hour day, or
we could.
And then we could go clause to clause after that.
Well, we can't go with if we use the 18th for officials. On the 19th we have Revenue Minister, and then on the 19th we have the Minister of National Revenue and officials, and then on the 30th we have the Minister of Finance, and so we could start clause by clause at 4:30 to get a start. The other problem we're running into is on the 31st. There's not room availability at 10, I believe it is. We want to start at 10 and go till, I think the motion said, 11 p.m. There is no room availability at 10, and we would have to start the meeting at 11. So if we used that first hour on the 20th, on the 30th, 4:30 to 5:30 to start clause by clause, we'd have a start. Ms. Benson, sorry.
Sorry, I just sort of going to ask a question just about a bit about process and sort of the order in which we're having people come. So you're sort of going to have the officials from the government departments as witnesses, and then they'll stay to be also help, sort of part of the clause by clause, all in the same. Do you think that makes sense?
No,
or?
When we go to clause by clause, there will be legislative people here and officials as well. When we go to clause by clause, we already did hold one session with officials, but we didn't have enough time to go through the complete list, and so we still have 4 or 5 groupings of officials to talk on the bill. Plus, as Ms. Raitt said, she'd like to see some justice officials here who understand the implications of the Canada Child Benefit, especially as it relates to separations and divorce. Okay.
Prove what we've just discussed.
So I think we're...
So we can get a running start on clause by clause after the minister's appearance on the 30th. And if it's okay with you folks and we get some head of steam on the 30th, why don't we go a little later than...
We can't on the 30th because that's the night that the Committee of the Whole, that the ministers in the House and people will need some time to prepare. He's there from 7 o'clock till... Starts at 7, I think, right?
Also.
Yes, yeah. So I think it's 7 till 11, and so people, Mr. Caron, wanted time to prepare. So we'll stay with the witness list we have. We'll continue to invite the ones on the list. We will bring the officials in on the 18th in the 2 time slots, and we'll start clause by clause following the minister's presentation on the 30th. So we're agreed to that. Okay, meeting adjourned.
That meeting will be